Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Good afternoon.
There we go. Alrighty, so it's 3. Welcome everyone to the ATAR Exam Mastery Workshop by Med Prep School. My name's Farhan. Today I'm joined by Sapanta, and I want to get straight into it because I don't want to hold you guys too long. As for the contents for today, we're going to be covering effective techniques, how to revise optimally, mistake documents, how you can stop making silly mistakes, exam reports, so you know exactly what to write in your questions and answers, time management, how you can schedule your practice from now until your exams, a general approach to exams, how you can use reading time and subconscious processing and external trigger exposure, 2 phenomena to help you actually navigate your way through these exams. We'll also talk a bit about mindset, how you can develop a winner's mentality and manage your exam anxiety.
So really in saying that, today is the best masterclass that you could possibly attend to cover every possible angle of preparing for these exams. No matter what your goal is for your ATAR or what your goal is for university, we will teach you how to beat these exams by the end of today.
And at the end, we'll have an open Q&A so that you can ask any and every question that you have for us. But first, who are we? So my name's Farhan. I scored a 99.75 in 2020, scoring a raw 49 in Chem and raw 48 in Bio and HSD in year 11. Scored a 3,180 in the UCAT. So for you med heads out there, that's the exam that you need to do to get into undergrad med. 3 years of experience in teaching, around 6 in mentoring experience, covering the VCE, the UCAT, the MMIs, medical interviews, and just volunteer high school tutoring as well. And I'm currently a 3rd-year medical student.
So I'm Sapanta, Spencer Duffy. My ATAR was 98.15. I got a couple raw 49s here and there. My UCAT was 3210, which I got last year, which is 98 percentile, also to get into medicine. I've got about 3 years experience. I'm a 1st-year medical student. I make some clothes too, for fun, but you don't make money off that. So who are we? So I guess we're like a mentoring service. We're doing this, to provide something to provide our perspective on how to prepare as best as possible for these exams. We've always had this dream to collate every possible angle of exam prep and just put it on YouTube as a multi-hour block to give people this value-packed resource for free. And I guess you could say our mission, mainly with Med Prep School being to, get students that want to study medicine into medicine and help future doctors achieve their dreams.
So before we begin, who are you? If you're joining us live today, pop into the chat box your year level, your state, and if you've got one, your desired career path, just so we know who we're talking to today. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to quickly go through our goal for today, which is to give you all the tools you need to be exam ready, whether or not you're in year 11, 12, wherever you are in your journey. We want to give you everything that we can today. And essentially, you guys can be the judge of whether or not we achieve that.
We'll just wait for some results to get into chat.
Let's see it. Where are you guys from today?
There we go. We've got year 11, New South Wales, emergency medicine physician. We've got Nandita, year 11, WA, med or bio. Nice, very nice. We've got 12, New South Wales, med. We've got 12, Victoria, engineer.
You know what's crazy? I recognize some of these names. They joined us for the the boot camp.
That's true. Yeah, I recognize these names as well. Year 11, Vic, med or science. Beautiful.
Fantastic. Alrighty. So let's get right into it. Let's begin with the contents for today. First off, we're going to talk about some effective techniques that you can use to revise your content. So we all know person A and person B in our lives, where person A, they got all the time in the world. Let me just get the annotations up. Time is on the up, and they've got no commitments. They study 5-6 hours after school, but they're still getting around the B and C mark. Whereas you've got Mr. or Mrs. School Captain here, school debating team, school sports team. They've got anything and everything on their plate, but they're still smashing it out with A+ and beyond. How are they doing this is the question that everyone seems to ask, right? How most students study is essentially by taking notes, by rereading notes, by highlighting notes, reading the textbook, or only listening to a lecture. However, how people like student B study is that they look at practice questions. They utilize their flashcards. They teach other people so that they can consolidate what they've already learned. They create mind maps from memory. Because the data shows that things like summarization, highlighting, and rereading are actually quite low in terms of their yield in getting you the results that you want.
Yeah, and beautiful. And so in saying that, right, like, of course, like highlighting things and rereading things is not necessarily useless. It's just low efficiency. Maybe it can be your first exposure to the content. Maybe the first time that you're learning about something, you're reading the textbook or listening to the lecture or highlighting those notes or, taking those notes. But if you really want to establish mastery in a subject, in a topic, or in content, you need to be teaching others, right? You need to be utilizing flashcards. You need to be utilizing mind maps from your memory, like brain dumps, right? Really absorbing things conceptually and doing as many practice questions as you can so that you cover for any possibility that they throw in front of you on the exams, right? Yeah.
But when you look at the data as well, the things that are high yield are things like practice testing and distributed practice. You've heard it before, things like active recall and spaced repetition. Unfortunately, we're going to be going through the same boring stuff again, but this time with actual tips on how you can implement it.
Right. And in saying that, right, like we have done like a lot of research, right? When it comes to actually studying and being effective and retaining, not only have we done a lot of research in our own process of studying through year 11 and 12, but in the people that we know from uni that also got into medicine, but all of the experience we have with students, the ways that we want to recommend you guys to work have been proven to be highly effective and high yield. So you really can't lose by taking these strategies from our perspective. And you might think, oh, by the dot points, like they're probably going to talk about things we've already heard. No, because we're coming at it from a very realist perspective. We're not coming here with some idealist, or just do this 5 hours a day and have a perfect diet and sleep a perfect amount every night. No, we're going to appeal to you. Why? Because we were the same, and we're not going to give you guys some false sense of ideology of, oh, you must be perfect or not, right? There's some other companies that do that.
So let me try and demonstrate what I mean by passive versus active learning. The easiest way that I can try and show this to you is passive learning is where you are trying to put things into your brain. This is like rereading things or just listening to things or just summarizing, highlighting, that sort of stuff. Active learning is when you get whatever's in your brain and you take it out. So this is hard effort. It looks like doing practice questions, doing flashcards, and it just takes a bit more stress on the brain. Passive is very tedious, it's boring. It feels like hard work, but in reality, it's not that useful. Whereas active work is immensely harder. It can be frustrating because you're going to get things wrong and you always have to think and retrieve information. It does feel like hard work, and in reality, it is actually incredibly useful because when you take stuff out of the brain, what you're doing is actually
teaching the brain how to let it go on exam day, right? Because when it comes to exam day and you're answering a question, you need to be better at taking what you know in your brain out and putting it on paper than taking things into your brain, which you do in passive learning. Now, in saying that, some things that I did, I used to sit my mum down in year 11 and 12, get a whiteboard and just run through every piece of content that I knew in chemistry, word for word. And I just teach her. She didn't know what was going on, to be honest, but it was just my way of figuring out how to put what's in my brain onto that whiteboard. And if you can teach someone a concept and they can understand it, even if they know nothing, ranging from as simple as possible to the extent of your knowledge, you embed it in your brain in a way that is completely, more efficient than anything that you could possibly think of, right? And I'm sure Farhan has similar experiences, right? Work with your friends to teach one another over and over again. When you don't know a question, or when your friend doesn't know a question, but you know it, teach it to them conceptually. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Allow yourself to figure out the structure to give to other people so that you can use it yourself as well, right? Use your surroundings.
So what we're actually talking about there is nothing new. It's quite a well-known phenomenon. It's called the Feynman technique, where if you're able to teach things to others and simplify things for others, then it means you inherently know your things really well.
Right. And our role here right now is to give you guys the easiest way to implement it, right? If you're at home, who else is at home? If there's anyone at home, while they could be doing their own work, while they're in the kitchen or while you're sitting in the living room, use them to explain anything that you know, right? we don't want you guys to go out of your way to do something crazy or unexpected or something unattainable, right? We are making this as accessible as possible. If you find anyone accessible to you, use them as a platform to talk to them about the things that you've learned today. Consolidate that at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of 3 months, right? And overall, that will deeply embed that into your mind conceptually, right? There's nothing more powerful than that.
Fantastic. Totally agree. So some tools that you can use now, apart from teaching other people, which I think is fantastic, are practice questions. And I fundamentally believe that practice questions are the best form of revision that you can do. So some resources that you can use are exam practice questions. And if you guys are in Victoria, I know the VC Cambridge checkpoints are fantastic for this stuff. Whenever I had spare time, I would just do practice questions from that. You've got practice exams from your state's archives. You've got textbook questions or even third-party company practice questions. But I think with official practice exams and practice questions that you can find as well, you've got plenty to work with.
Essentially, there's kind of nothing better than your state's archives, right? If you're in Victoria, if you go on the VCAR website, right, Victorian something commission, I think for tertiary admission or something, right? You search up VCAR past exams, there is nothing more valuable than that. Absolutely nothing. And just before we continue, if anyone at any point has any questions at all, I'm reading chat as we go. So please put anything that you want to ask into chat in an instant, and we'll get back to you. To every single question, we'll get back to. Wonderful.
Fantastic. So let me run you through the process of what happens when you do a practice question. When you do a practice question, there are only two outcomes. The first is you get everything correct, which is fantastic because what you're doing is you're consolidating information that you've already learned in a very active manner. And this keeps you fresh on the topic and means you likely don't need to revisit or relearn that section anytime soon. The second outcome is that you get something wrong, which is actually also a fantastic thing because you've just found out where your weaknesses lie. This is golden information. Here is where you revisit these concepts and make sure you know them well so that your performance on these practice questions improve. And the only way to tell if you've really improved is to do more practice questions. So it's great in terms of consolidating what you already know, but also in terms of diagnosing what you need to be working on.
Yes.
So that's why it is probably the best form of revision that you can do.
I wouldn't even waste my time going over notes. I would just do the questions and see what I know and what I don't know. And from there, I might refer to my notes. Practice questions are so powerful. We've got a couple of questions in chat. Hey guys, what is the best way to approach my revision for biology? Do you want to take that far?
Yeah, so I think essentially with biology, you want to know your stuff really well. So here we're covering exam mastery. It's all about kind of applying what you already know, but that's with the presumption that you know your content quite well. And in terms of knowing the content well, it's a lot of making mind maps with bio, especially with the immunology stuff. It's a lot of kind of seeing where things fit in with one another. So I know Unit 3 in particular is a lot of like very cell-based. And really, if you stop looking at biology as like what's Unit 3 area study 1, what's area study 2, and instead see it as like an actual subject where things come together, I think that can help quite well.
But also in regards to that, if you want to revise well for biology, try to apply all those concepts to the real world and really truly understand them conceptually in your surroundings, right? So for example, in Sem 1 of Med at uni, like we covered a lot of biochem. My most effective method of knowing what was going on was thinking about that in regards to the real world. Or for example, chemicals, right? In terms of chemistry, I would always, when I was even pouring a glass of water, really think about what's happening in regards to the water molecules, et cetera, right? And in saying that, right, like, there's certainly, the biology is very application based. So once again, I'd focus deeply on questions and then what do the examiners want to see? What are the keywords that you need to have, and finding ways to actually prepare answers in bio that you can go into the exam already done previously, that you've already written out multiple times, right? That way you go into the exam already knowing what to write before you even see the questions. You'll already have a bit of a predictive outset, right? We're going to leave the rest of the questions for later because we want to get through the content as soon as possible, but we are keeping up with them, every single one.
What we want you to do rather is just keep a note of the questions that you want to ask throughout the entire thing and just dump it all on us in the open Q&A, and we'll make sure to get to all of them. Just because we've got quite a bit of stuff to go through. We're on slide 49 out of like 300 right now.
Or 400, I think.
Yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
So an example of practice question application is let's say you forgot the definition of natural selection, right? A poor approach would be trying to rote memorize the definition word for word and then trying to apply that to practice questions again and again. Memorization doesn't really work like that. A good approach would be to watch a video on natural selection and understand like what it actually is, including some case studies like the Galapagos finches, for example. So you'd see the definition for natural selection from past exam answers if it's available, and you would associate that with what you've actually learned, as in going out of your way to learn the concept a bit more in depth. Because that way you realize you don't actually need to memorize much. You are actually just applying what you know.
So essentially learn something so well conceptually by watching the right videos, sourcing the right content, that you could actually create your own definition for it. And it wouldn't be too far from the prescribed definition that your exam answers give you, right? That's how well you should know a topic, to the point where you could actually create your own definition that is not that far from what the textbook would say.
Next is flashcards. It's a quicker version of practice questions. It's not entirely exam representative, which is a con, I suppose, but it's still a very, very active form of learning. Some resources that you could use are Anki, which is admittedly a bit of a pain to set up. It's got a bit of a steep learning curve, but once you do have it set up, it is incredibly useful and efficient. A lot of med students use it for their own revision as well. You've got Quizlet, which is online, so no setup is required, but unfortunately, most good features are a premium now. And you've got physical flashcards, which mean that you kind of have complete control over what you write on the flashcard, but it's quite time efficient and impractical.
It's very inefficient. We wouldn't recommend using physical flashcards. Carrying them around, knowing how many you have, it's just so much more consolidated and efficient to do it online.
So where would you use flashcards? Things for definitions. If you're doing one of the languages as one of your subjects, that can really help. Or things like mnemonics. For example, in HHD, everyone knows bad cats smell dead rats for the, this is like 4 years ago now. Is it the Ottawa Charter?
Yeah, it's Ottawa Charter.
Yeah.
Which is, don't even worry about that, but it's just something you got to remember in HHD. I did that subject as well.
Yeah. Next is brain dumps, which is actually very similar to what you were talking about with your mum. You'd go down and just like on a whiteboard, dump out everything you know.
Right. And after you dump out everything you know, it's like, all right, I'm going to put out everything in my arsenal that I'm possibly capable of knowing. And then your gaps will be so clear. You'll see, oh, wait a second, I forgot this or I forgot that, when I go through and compare it to a complete diagram that I might have made with notes. And then from memory, you progressively build in and fill those gaps, and eventually you have a complete picture.
So what does this process look like from start to finish? You pick any topic, try not to have it too broad. You grab a pen and paper. You jot down literally anything and everything you can remember about the topic. Do this without consulting notes or the internet. And if you're just unsure about something, put a star next to it and move on. Continue until you've put down everything that you remember. And at the end, revisit the start points by looking them up in your notes or online. And contrast what you've written down with a set of notes or what it might say online to see what you might have missed. Exactly like Sapanta said. A bit of a warning, this does take time. It is difficult to do, but the rewards are very great. And
actually at the end, I've prepared a schedule and like a checklist that you guys are going to use for your exam preparation that I'm going to email out to all of you. We're going to give you guys a link to put your email in, and I'm going to send that out to all of you. And it's going to be like a checklist of, have I done this? Like it'll have brain dump on it. Then it'll subset into, okay, brain dump structure, each topic, then under that topic into more detail, etc. And you guys just have to fill in those gaps, and I'll email that through to everyone at the end.
I used to love to do this before every SAC or internal assessment I had, because, for example, it wouldn't be just a brain dump on biology. It would be a brain dump on this particular area of study that I needed to revise for my SAC on Tuesday, for example. So I found this to be a great tool. So now you know what tools to use, but how often should you be using these tools? So let me introduce to you spaced repetition, which you've probably heard before, but if this is the first time, let's go through it. So this is the forgetting curve. When you learn something for the first time, hopefully you know 100% of what you've learned if you were paying diligent attention, right?
Yeah.
Now, the issue is that as time goes on, we tend to forget in almost this kind of fashion, right? In just one day after, you've lost around 50% of what you've learned. So what we do to offset the forgetting curve is actually try and
restart the forgetting curves
Yeah.
process, right? So we bring it back up to the top, and each time we bring it back up to the top and we recover that concept, or we reapply that concept actively, we slow down the process of us forgetting it. You know, there's things in year 12 chemistry that I still haven't forgotten, and I don't even work with year 12 chemistry at all. So really, there's no reason why I shouldn't know it, but I knew it so well because I really enjoyed it, and I attributed it to the real world around me, that I really understood and kept those concepts with me because they are actually helpful for me on the day-to-day. You need to learn to love what you study, and that way you will understand what you study, and that way you will learn it better and thus remember it better and retain it forever, right? Apply it to your day-to-day world. There is nothing more that I can encourage you to do. Learn to love what you study.
And as you can see with the forgetting curve, the more you study things, the less steep the forgetting curve actually gets. This is why if you revise things properly, you don't actually need to revise them that frequently come the end of the year. So spaced repetition is basically all about doing study for concepts soon after you learn them, brushing up on concepts throughout the year. And the more you've already done something, the less you'll need to go through it in the future.
It's essentially like a long-term investment in yourself. Like, why wouldn't you invest in your future that way? By doing a little bit more today, you reduce the amount that you have to do tomorrow. And it significantly saves you time in exam time, where all you need to be doing is practice exams over and over again, essentially, right? And then you might ask, like, how do I know what to actually study, right? I mean, you know,
So this is a tip that I've actually stolen from Ali Abdal from YouTube, and essentially tried to adapt it. But what I do is I list out every little dot point of what I need to know for a particular exam. Unfortunately, I've lost my my VCE ones, my year 11, 12 ones, because they're lost in my school email, which I've lost access to. But here was one for one of my med exams, where I wrote down pretty much every little thing that I needed to know. And then I would grade myself on how comfortable I was with that topic. So if something was red, I was not confident on it. If it was yellow, I'd be getting most questions correct, but I'm still unsure about some parts. There is still room for improvement. And if it was green, then I could confidently teach this to someone else.
Yeah, and this template is part of the pack that we'll email out at the end to everyone. Yeah.
So how do you make a retrospective revision timetable like so? That's what Ali Abdal called it. Make one for each of your subjects. Split your subject into as many subtopics as possible. And if it helps, organize it by the area of study. Use your syllabus or study guides as a guide on what to include. So here's an example for Victoria, where this is the psychology study design, where they give you the key knowledge dot points that you need to know for sleep, for example. And you'll find that a lot of states and they have their syllabuses written out, so they can really only test you on that syllabus.
They legally have to have a syllabus with dot points, legally. Like, they cannot have a syllabus that does not clearly clearly define the scope of the study and how how high the breadth of study is, right? So everything you need to know is actually in these study designs. So use your study designs.
Okay, so lastly, I just want to talk a bit about practice exams, because I personally think they're the highest yield form of practice. We've got practice questions, they're fantastic, but the exams, they're good because they're practice questions and simulating exam conditions in one. The cons is that it does take blocks of time to finish. They can be mentally fatiguing, but it's that fatigue that kind of acclimatizes you to the conditions anyways. My tip would just do them. Doing some is better than none. And if you need a structure as to how to go about your practice exams, here's exactly what I did. Put in your exam dates into a calendar, work backwards from those exam dates, prioritize recent exam dates to be closer to the exam that you're doing, and then just go crazy, do the exams.
Now, in saying that, right, what I did was, I made something very similar to this. So I actually plotted in every single exam I plan to do for a certain subject by the exam day. And I started from the earliest exams, like 1998 version, for example. I didn't do the 1998 version. I'd probably the 2008 version. And then I'd work my way up to 2021. And if I felt like I was running out of time, I would cut out a few of the ones and I'd prioritize the more recent ones again. And another way you can do it is start at the most recent ones, then go back to the old ones, then redo the most recent ones after you've completely prepared for the exams. That's also a good strategy to use. because that way you're also prioritizing what is being tested the most frequently, recently, and relevantly based on your examiners that are writing these exams. And yeah, like obviously just do them. Even if you don't know the content, star that question, check the answer, ask your teacher, right? Don't avoid doing exams because you think you're not ready, right? That's the biggest mistake that I've seen.
Yeah, so this is just an example of what my thing looked like. I would basically have all of my exams listed out. So starting with English, then methods, specialists, so on and so forth. And then I would work backwards. So this is actually November, this is October, so the month before. And you can see the week before I kind of had empty because I didn't want to be doing all that much work. I wanted to kind of rest a bit. But before that was the most recent exams I had access to, 2019 NHT, keeping in mind I did mine in 2020. And then I just kind of went backwards from there, doing 2 sets of exams per week, which you might find is doable for you. I found it quite tough, even during lockdown. Just whatever you can get through.
To be honest, yeah. In exam time, I think I did sometimes 2 exams a day, sometimes 3 every day. Every day. Yeah. Like when you get to like swap back, if you're at home all day, okay, you wake up at 8. What's the time? All right, you eat breakfast, you shower, you get ready. Okay, it's 10:30. I'm still at home. 10:30 to 12:30, you do an exam. You correct it for an hour. Take 2 hours break, do another one. Take 2 hours break, do another one. Eventually, you have 6 hours of break that you just allocated yourself. That's more than enough. And you fit 3 exams into that day. And you must force yourself to do those exams if you actually want to have the discipline to get where you need to go. And why would you ever leave exams to studying the night before, right? You must be prepared for them weeks in advance. You must actually be ready for every exam by your first or second exam date, no matter the subject. All of your subjects you need to be prepared for before your exams even begin to that degree. Now, obviously, you're going to keep working throughout the exams, between exams, but just to be safe and secure, you must be ready for every exam that you have before your first or second exam. Otherwise, of course, if you're going to be spending the night before preparing for that exam, then it's quite inefficient. And in fact, I've been there. For my health and human development exam, I did no practice exams. And the night before, I stayed up till 2 a.m. Trying to memorize everything, to be honest with you. Like I made that mistake, but it didn't matter because I knew that it was not that significant of a subject for me anyhow. But yeah, don't leave it to chance and don't leave it to luck. Create your own luck, and we'll get to that.
I won't name drop any schools, but I know some top private schools in Victoria, they finish all their content by term 2 or like by the end of term 2 in year 12, I think.
Yeah.
So that their entire term 3 and 4 is basically just exam revision.
Yeah. And they basically get their students to do exams every lesson, back and forth, back and forth. And there's so many studies that show your performance is actually directly correlated with your exposure to practice exams and how many practice questions you've seen and how many questions you've done and marked and got wrong and right. It directly correlates to your performance in the end.
Alrighty. Fantastic. So at this point, we've gone through a lot. So I want to give us a little break. So if you've got any questions, we may as well go through them now. And maybe in around 5 or so minutes, we'll get started with the next point, which is about mistake documents and exam reports. Alrighty. So let's run through some of the questions in there.
All right. So I don't know if it's like this in the other states, but H-bio and bio are separate subjects in WA. I feel like I understand concepts, but I'm not able to hack the marking key. Are you doing enough questions? How are you analyzing these questions? Have you asked your teacher? What advice does your teacher have? Are you sure you're understanding the concepts, right? What resources are you using? Have you seeked it, as like an efficient YouTube video rather than forcing yourself to read a textbook? That's what I have on that. Do you want to cover this one? How do you active recall for a subject like methods? Questions,
yeah.
But also conceptually understanding methods is very important. I would watch videos on how the concepts and methods actually came about in the first place. Like when I did methods, I was analyzing, okay, what actually is calculus, right? What is differentiating? Why do we use derivatives? How does that aid us in the real world? Oh, I get it now. And that's what it is, visualized. And I would learn to visualize everything. And for that, in that way, you can active recall by bringing things out of your brain in methods and putting them on paper. How do I make a proper mind map? Like this. So let's look at this. Let's just go to mind map. Right, okay. We're going to call this for example, we're going to call this, let's call this, English language, right? English language is a linguistic subject in Victoria. English language minor, right? The three main pillars of this subject are social purpose, right? You want to discuss context, right? Context of a given passage, right? Why people are talking what they're talking, and register, right? And because these are the three main pillars, they're always going to be interconnected, as everything is interconnected in chemistry and biology. From Unit 4, AOS 2 to Area of Study 1 in Unit 3 in Term 1, they will have some form of connection. Now under context, what are the factors that we have, right? There's a mnemonic that we call FARMS, right? Or under social purpose, you list out everything you know. This is like a brain dump almost, right? Now, if you really want to be efficient and you don't want to write things, and you only want to write things that you must have in words for you to remember, you can turn things into diagrams, right? So to me, farms could represent a cow, right? And like each leg of the cow could represent, for example, your right leg, you put it down on the ground, it tells you where your setting is, right? Your back leg might show you where your audience is, right? The eyes of the cow might show you where the audience is, or the setting, or for example, the mode, like, is it written or spoken? You could put it on the mouth of the cow, right? And analogize and metaphorize these things to remember them in abstract ways. In fact, if I were to tell you to imagine a stinky cow on a red car, that's a Ferrari in the middle of the ocean on a jet, you're never going to forget that visually. I want you to examine that and try as hard as possible to not think about it. Don't think about that. Don't think about a stinky cow on a Ferrari on a jet in the ocean. Don't think about that, but you're thinking about it and you're never going to forget that. Now, what if you attach that memory to different aspects of your content? You can never lose. That's how I would go about it.
Fantastic. No, I love that. That was so insightful. And just to name drop as well, a good resource on YouTube is Justin Sung, who knows a lot about this stuff. So if you want to look at how to make mind maps conceptually, like the frameworks and theories, I think he does it really well.
Very quickly, we're just going to run through this quickly. Do you think 4 weeks is enough to start doing a 3-4 exam? Haven't done any exams because I only just now finished Unit 4. It's more than enough time. You have 28 days, aim for 10 exams, one every few days. I find that sometimes in bio, I don't know the knowledge when doing practice questions. What should I do? Search up the knowledge on YouTube and watch efficient videos or ask your teacher.
The revision lectures are also really good as well. So I know on Facebook, there are quite a few revision lectures that go through just like an entire unit all at once. They give you not the ins and outs, but like the main points of what you need to know. And I think that can help refresh.
When it comes to making mind maps for bio and chem, I would turn everything into diagrams and I would really think about things conceptually. For example, in chem, right? Like in unit, in Victoria in Unit 3, the first topic that we covered was fuels. As part of fuels, we discussed polarity. Polarity came up at the end of the year in food molecules in chem, right? And then through that, I would draw a mind map where I would connect these two concepts and overlap them. And it would be food molecules and a logo of fuel, and they would both have an arrow to the same thing. That's a polarity, which I could represent using a compass, right? Understand things on a conceptual level that way. And in that regard, if you don't want to make mind maps, brain dump in words, everything that you know in chem, word for word, and whatever you can't fill in, go back and learn it, right? To prevent the forgetting curve, what is the timeline for revising concepts? How often? Honestly, if you learn something today, cover it in 3 days, then 2 weeks, then a month, then 3 months. That's how I would do it. I think that's a pretty systematic. Year 11 in Victoria, I'm doing 3-4 bio and accounting. Since I'm in year 11, I got to go to school every day. How should I structure my nights? I get home at 4, go to bed at 12. First of all, I think you should go to bed earlier.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
But we'll get into that. We'll get into that. Right. There's a lot more for us to cover. In saying that, I mean, if you're getting home at 4, we'd want you to sleep at like 10 or 11 latest, honestly. That gives you a few solid hours. I'd say use your school time effectively to read and listen in class, right? Because that's majority, right? Listen to your teachers, ask questions, be prepared in school, right? And then use your lunch times. Maybe get to school an hour early. That's what I did in year 12. I got to school an hour early and I just do UCAT prep, right? That was my hour of UCAT for the day. Before school is very valuable. And then when I'd come home, I'd aim for an exam and I'd go through it, maybe 2, and then go through it the next day. Should I be doing bio and accounting exams every night? In my opinion, yes, because 1-2 subjects can sometimes be compensated for in 3-4. And a lot of times, anything that's relevant in your year 11 subject will be recovered in your year 12 subject. If not, it's much more worth it to focus on 3-4 and relearn whatever you missed out on next year or when the time comes. Because 3-4 actually matters. Your year 12 scores actually matter towards your ATAR.
And just a little personal anecdote. In year 11, I did 2 exams as well. I did bio and HSD, and I got 48s in both of them. And going into year 12, it was so much calmer than what I imagined what it would be like if you had done none in year 11.
Trust me, if you guys can get good study scores as early entry subjects, you relieve so much pressure on year 12 if you're in year 11. Like when they never gave me an early entry, I actually had to compensate the same ATAR with 5 subjects, which is pretty crazy because they didn't believe in me to perform in an early entry subject. In any case, though, prioritize your year 11 early entry subjects, right? So anything you're doing that's a year 12 subject, focus on that.
Okay. Alrighty, great questions. Let's get into our next topic for today, which is mistake documents. So we all know that person that might have done like 50 plus practice exams, but still end up not scoring that great. We also maybe know that person that did like 4 or 5 practice exams and absolutely smashed it. Killer exams, killer study score. But why? Most people think, well, the more you do, the better you do. Well, the reason between the difference is because of people like person B learn from their mistakes. You see, the common factor between all elite performers, whether they're aware of it or not, is that they are relentless with ironing out any mistakes in their game. So, practice questions and exams are only an excellent resource if, and only if, you learn from them. You note down the mistakes that you made or guesses that you had to make. You note down anything that you had trouble with. Practice questions and exams are honestly a bit of a waste of time if you keep making the same silly mistakes over and over and over again. If you don't note down where your weaknesses are, and if you don't try and improve every time you do a question or an exam. So the question is, how can I maximize the questions and exams that I do? Let's enter the mistake document. So this is exactly what I did in year 12. This is screenshots from what I did. For example, for each of my exams, I would note down whatever mistakes I made. So let's jump into that chemistry folder. Here are all the exams that I did. Let's jump into 2018, for example. Here in the mistake document, I would note down every question that I had trouble with, I got wrong, or I thought just was like a cheeky question. One that a lot of people got wrong, but it's something to note down on, right? So I'd have the question, I'd have the answer from the exam report, and then my own commentary on why I got it wrong or had trouble with it. And I did this for every exam, for every subject at the end of year 12.
Me too, but only for chem actually only for chem. But because my subjects weren't really like Farhan's. Like Farhan was doing spec and bio. I didn't do spec or bio. Farhan was also doing other subjects that I didn't do. My subjects were like, I had studio art, I had English language, which is like linguistics. Our overlaps are probably chem and methods. And yeah, but to be honest, like with my subjects, it was much more conceptually based in regards to like, it wasn't effective for me to put an studio arts question into this document and talk about why I got it wrong, because the matter is much more than 1 or 2 marks. Each question was like 13 marks and it's abstract, right? So there's no real clear-cut way to the answer.
So aside from the exams themselves, I also did this for just in general. So in chemistry, I would put down whatever mistakes I did by topic. So volumetric analysis, HPLC, food chem, whatever it was. But unfortunately, I started my mistake document quite late, around the time you guys are in right now, if you're in year 12 or even year 11 for your 3-4s that you might be doing. But if I could do it again from the start of year 12 or even at the start of year 11, this is exactly what I would be doing. So what are my suggestions to you? I suggest that you split your mistake document up by subject. You keep this on a cloud-based service that you can access anytime or anywhere. Some resources are like Notion, which I used right there, Google Docs, OneNote, or literally anything else that you can do something similar with. What do? You do practice questions or exams. You go through them and mark them diligently against proper answers, and you keep track of mistakes guesses or tricky questions, including the ones you got right.
And in saying that, right, it's really easy to just give yourself the mark to think, oh yeah, well, I'm close enough. No, because the examiners don't think of it that way. Even if you're slightly off, you say that you didn't get the mark. You function strict. And if you lower your expectations, you will always overperform. And I think that's a perspective to come at it. You have to be honest with yourself. Don't give yourself marks that you do not deserve.
Fantastic. Totally agree. Now, with the mistake document comes hand in hand the exam reports. And I think this is very underrated. It's probably the most underutilized Year 12 resource ever. No amount of money will get you what these resources give you. So learn to use these resources well. It'll almost mean that a good exam score is guaranteed. But what is it? It's stuff like this. Here's an example from the VC psychology exam, right? Where they give you pretty much what they are expecting you to write for this 5-marker, including an example of a high scoring response.
Word for word.
Yeah. Here's one from the HSC legal studies point of view. Here's one from the QCE physics point of view with all the working out that you need. The SACE chemistry, WACE accounting. Even if you look hard enough, you'll find the IB ones. But yeah, why are these so gold? Why are they so good? Answers and explanations here are given by the chief examiner of each subject. And it shows good quality structure. It shows what keywords to try and incorporate. And it shows what evidence they use to prove whatever answers they have.
And the chief examiner is the guy that decides whether this answer is going to get this mark or not ultimately, and what each question requires for full marks. So they're top dog in the whole state for that subject. So listen to them. Yeah.
I just want to give you a note though, that the answers in these reports may not be the best, but rest assured, they will give you a decent response, giving you 90% of what you need. The theory is that they don't give out 10 out of 10 responses out of fear that too many people are going to figure out the game and keep on recycling those answers.
Yeah, which is true, right? That's objectively true, right? I will say it's quite obvious that sometimes the answers they put, they're still really good and they still hit all the marks, but they're definitely not the best possible answer ever done for that question. They're just a good guide for you to even do better than yourself.
Yeah. So make sure you include everything mentioned in the exam report answers in your own answers, but don't be afraid to go the extra mile as well to really get those 10 out of 10 answers. In terms of integrating this, combine the mistake document with the examiner's report if you want good exam performance. Yes, I know it's going to be time consuming. It's going to be boring and tedious, but it is the #1 exam investment of time that you can make. It gives you effective mistake focus as you go, and it gives you easy revision later. Your future self will thank you very much. For example, if I just scroll back up to my mistake document, after I was done with all of this stuff, all I would do is literally go through my mistake document and try and figure out, why did I get this question wrong? What do I need to remember from that? And move on. Cool. So now this brings us to time management. And again, guys, if you've got any questions at any point in time, please pop them through and we'll get to them at the next break. So let's start with Pareto's principle. So this is basically what you might know as the 80-20 rule, where 20% of input gets 80% of the output. It doesn't take much to learn how to run and kick a ball. It's not even that hard to play for a team as long as you put in some effort to improve. But to become a professional, now we're talking about a lifetime of development and improvement for this person to get to where they are. It doesn't take much to put string to a bow. And it's not even that hard to learn how to use your fingers and play your first piece. But to become a highly sought after violinist for classical solos, for example, that takes a lifetime of practice and dedication. So putting it into an academic context, getting 80% on a test only actually takes 20% of your maximal effort. So what am I telling you to do? I want you to play the game. You don't need to ace everything. Now, don't get me wrong. You still need very good marks, just not 100% on everything.
Now, in saying that, basically what we're getting at is play the game strategically. If you know that an 80% is good enough on this SAC, use your time after you know you'll get 80% on something else that is requiring more of your time. After a certain point, you have diminishing returns. Let's say you study 3 hours for a SAC for chemistry, for a chemistry test. By 3 hours of study, you've probably secured, let's say, 80%. If you study another 3 hours, you're only going to go from 80 to 85, whereas you could use another 3 hours to get from 0 to 80 on a whole other exam or another test, right? And keep in mind which subjects contribute the most to your ATAR, so you attribute the most time to those subjects, right? For example, in Victoria, English is without a doubt your most important subject. If English is lower than your top 4 aggregate in general, you're suffering, your ATAR will suffer. You should never allow English to not be good in a Victorian ATAR. And we've got an example of that perfectly here, right? Like this student, if they had gotten, for example, a 45 on English or something higher, if we go here.
I've got the example written up. But before we get to that though, I just wanted to show you that the English is a requirement in the Victorian side of things, just to like draw on that. But again, the reason we're telling you that is don't study as if you need 100% on everything. Because in fact, those that win at the ATAR are jacks of all trades instead of masters of one.
Correct.
So yeah, so we've got this student, and let's just say with the following scores, they score an ATAR of 94.75. Now, they're a particular gun at biology, scoring a 45. And improving a 45 to a 50, for example,
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be extremely difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult because at these scores, the tiniest of margins is what separates the best in each subject. And this improvement would yield a +5 to your aggregate score. What do I mean by aggregate score? Basically, how your ATAR is calculated is that they add up all of these scaled numbers and that they rank you on a percentile basis. So 94.75 means that you performed better than 94.75% of the state, essentially. Okay, so keep that in mind. Going from a 45, an already good score, to a 50, something that's very, very difficult, would get you only a +5 in your aggregate. And if we do that, we can see that this student, their ATAR goes up by 1.1. Not bad. That's pretty good. Pretty impressive. These changes can make huge differences to one's ATAR. But let's take it back. Let's backtrack a bit and come back to our original proposed ATAR. Let's say that instead of shooting the biology up by 5, instead this went up to a 40 and this went up to a 40. This is going to be comparatively much, much, much easier than trying to push your biology up to a 50, because at the lower study scores, it is objectively easier to improve your scores. And actually, this would yield an improvement of 6 to your aggregate score. And if we apply those, you'd see that this person's ATAR actually goes up to 96.25. So you can see side by side, if they tried to bump their biology up from a 45 to a 50, they'd only get a 95.85. Whereas with actually a less investment of time and effort, if they worked on their English and PE instead, they would get a higher ATAR of 96.25. A 0.4 difference that you actually get by not putting in as much work, but instead putting in the work where you need to.
Where there's the most opportunity to gain, right? Like you don't, yeah, in saying that, right? Like, for example, for me, I knew, well, to be honest with you, in my subjects, I got like a scaled 44 point something in chem. I got a scaled 49.44 in English language, whatever, 49 studio. I knew that my efforts were best used in English language and studio art. And I knew that I could get those study scores. But I also knew that I had to be very proficient in chemistry to make it just good enough to carry me to that 44 or so. And that way I would secure the rest of my ATAR. If I just put all my life into getting studio art from a 49 to a 50, I would have missed out on getting my chemistry from a 36 to a 44, right? So why would you invest that time into one single, study school? And when it comes to English, right? Like, if you want to get good at normal English, right, it's a game of one, structure and versatility. So you understand all the varieties and variables and factors of the text you're studying and how you can twist it to fit any prompt they give you. And so really know your text well. And second of all, Practice writing different essays and ask your teachers to mark them harshly and give you 3 actionable items basically on how you can improve every time, right? That's what I did in year 12.
That's pretty good. Okay. So I know all of that can sound like we're trying to limit. I'm not telling you to limit yourself and think that you need to be scoring below 100% because you've got multiple assignments or exams to go. If you can ace something, then do it. Get as high as you possibly can. But the reason we are telling you this is because you've got a limited amount of time and you need to try and maximize as many marks as possible when you have a limited amount of time to study. So it's your choice. You can put in an hour of time to study and you can either reap 2 extra marks in a subject that you're already good at, or 5 extra marks where you know that you need to put a bit more work into that subject. It's your choice.
You'd always rather be pretty good at everything than mediocre at most, but really good at one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack of all trades beats the master of one. Alrighty. So let's try and tie this in with opportunity cost. And I've got a little example here to try and demonstrate this. I want you to imagine for a second that there are 2 slot machines. Let's call them A and B. Now, we're not trying to promote gambling or anything, but just for analogy's sake, I think this does make the point clear. Let's just say in order to use both of these machines, they cost $1 to use each for every turn. Now, slot machine A is very good. It always gives you a return of $2. That's amazing. You're literally doubling your money by putting it into slot A without any risk in this hypothetical scenario. But on the other hand, slot machine B gives you a return of $5 every time you use it. There's no catch. There's no malicious terms or conditions. It's the same thing as slot machine A, except it gives you a return of $3 more every single time. So tell me, which of these 2 would you rather? See, opportunity cost is a very important principle to take away from this lesson. Because when you choose to do action A, what that means is that you actively choose not to do actions B, C, or D. By doing something, you are always sacrificing your ability to do another thing by virtue of the fact that you've only got 24 hours in a day, 16 of which are usable. So why is this important? Too many times I see students wasting time on things they shouldn't really be doing. Take this student, for example, an absolute whiz at further maths, not so good at their legal studies or psychology. Yes, by studying more and more and more further mathematics, they may well be on their way to attaining a solid study score in this subject. They could even land a perfect score on this subject. Good on them.
But they neglect the other subjects that they feel they're not good at, right? And when you neglect that, the harm that you face is much higher than being good at one thing. And it's just back to the point of really stressing, right? I mean, try to be as good as you possibly can be at everything without sacrificing the scores that you need, right? Like if you know there's a subject that's going to be your killer subject and carry your ATAR, you get it done and you get that subject to the study score that you want, but do not neglect your other subjects, right? It's very important. Now you might have a subject that's a complete dud that you know that no matter what you do, it's just not for you. Also, do not waste your time on that, right? For example, from the beginning of year 12, I let go of methods and I didn't do anything for health and human. Right, I was really only working with my top 4 and I basically had to get 2 scores above 48 guaranteed for me to be anything, right, or get anywhere, right? And that's a risk that I took, but I knew that if I spent time on methods, I was wasting my time for myself, right? When I could be upholstering and gaining more in other subjects, right?
So the point of opportunity cost is that you need to know what you're working towards and what the next step for you is to improve.
Like, what can you do now and what will that reap most? And essentially, like, prioritizing the action for the day or the week, right? That's your goal. And you make sure that you get it done. And then you see that great benefit and you see you're productive and your study areas are balanced. And too many people neglect subjects that they don't like or they feel like they're not good at.
Yeah, exactly. So now a bit of a tangent on the opportunity cost principle. And this is specifically for the year 11s and specifically for people that want to get into med, just because we're med prep school and this is our interest. You guys already know that if you're serious about getting into med, you need to sit the UCAT. So what I will say is that the overwhelming majority of students neglect the UCAT until it's way too late. Now, if you really do the math, 1 SAC or internal assessment is worth just 3 minutes of the UCAT. And putting together Pareto's principle and opportunity cost, I think it's clear to see that prioritizing the UCAT would be a must. And you'll find that when the UCAT time comes around, you might find yourself making sacrifices to your SACs. In fact, my very worst SACs came during the UCAT period. Did it sting a bit? Yeah, it wasn't perfect. Do I care? No. I got to where I wanted to be. Ask anyone in medicine right now, and none of them will care how they got to where they did, just as long as they've made.
And in saying that, right, your exams will compensate for any SAC score that you feel like is lackluster. Right, your SAC scores are very insignificant. If all of your SACs are, low scoring, then yeah, that's an issue. But if one SAC isn't there, it actually makes close to no difference. If you perform on the exam, it makes up for everything. But remember, each SAC is just 3 minutes of the UCAT. And the UCAT is essentially 20 times as important than biologic of, the things that you're doing in school. And, a 1 or 2 hour exam is the same as a year's worth of study for your ATAR, right? So keep that in mind.
Cool. So I think that's actually all that we wanted to say for opportunity cost. So this brings us to our break before we get into the general approaches to exams. So if you've got any questions about all this time management stuff or mistake documents and exam reports, please, the floor is yours.
Well, any questions at all, like put any questions you have in the chat.
Like 5 minutes and then get going at 4, I reckon.
So you started off with.
How do I make a good plan for revision? I'm in the holidays right now and I'm taking 6 subjects. So what can I do? So if we're trying to incorporate everything that we've gone through so far, try and prioritize. Make sure you know what your priority subjects are, because you actually shouldn't be spreading your time evenly across your 6 subjects, because naturally you're going to be better at some than others. Because if you're trying to spread things evenly, then you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. And what I wish I had done to even to maximize my ATAR even more is instead of spending so much time on spec and chem, which I was already strong at, like spend some time on English, which I really needed to bring up. And it was only in the last 2 to 3 weeks of my preparation that I really started to take that in. And I wish I had done that earlier. So number 1 is you prioritize. And then number 2 is I would be making that retrospective revision timetable for each subject. If we go up, that's exactly what we talked about here in terms of popping down everything about that subject and grading yourself harshly on where you sit on that, right? You could give yourself a green on some of these, but you're not really confident. I'd encourage you highly not to do that, because the whole point of this is to visually see how much of the subject you know back to front. And it's quite appealing once you've ticked everything in green.
Yeah, and in saying that, you got to plan out your subjects and your exams based on the study scores that you need, what's attainable, and how much you need to do for that study score. Right, so be strategic. Is it possible to absolutely come back in exams? Yes, it is. Exams can completely compensate for any SAC that you feel like you messed up. It's so possible. It just depends on how hard you work. If you want it enough, if you're hungry enough and you work hard, you'll see results. That's how it's simple as that.
It depends on the split, but I know for the sciences especially, it's a 40% internal split and 60% exam split, meaning that everything that you do internally is worth 40%.
Yeah.
If you boss the exam, none of this will matter all that much.
And to be honest, the 60 can increase. There's people that got a 50% on a SAC that was average 83%, and they ended up getting a raw 40 in that subject. Yeah, there's absolutely no stress associated with that. The exam compensates for everything. If you perform on the exam, you change everything. All your SACs can basically get wiped out. So perform on the exams.
Vice versa, as in if you perform really well in the SACs, but the exam doesn't go to plan,
Mm.
it can equally wipe out your score as well.
Shoot you in the foot.
Cool. So if there are no particular questions at this point in time, let's get into the general approaches to exams. And I want to begin by talking about reading time. And let's begin with the English subject. So Sapanta did English language. I did mainstream English in year 12. And I'll talk a bit about the mainstream English side of things, and then I'll pass over to Sapanta for the English language point of view. So I've singled out English here because the approach to this subject is quite different to all of the other exams that you might need to do. I'll also preface this by saying that my experience, unfortunately, is limited to this type of English, whereas where students have to write 3 essays in 3 hours. I know other states and subjects might have slightly different exams, but the principles should remain the same if your exam is similar. So again, we've got 3 essays to write in 3 hours. So what would I do in this exam? I would read any material that was given to me. Everyone is given the same material in terms of one of our articles. So we have 3 essays to write, A, B, and C. And for option C, or for essay C, everyone gets a common article to read. So I'd be reading that because you can really distinguish yourself here, given the fact that everyone has the same material to work with. Now is probably not the time to remember all the quotes that you should already know having studied your text. The more time you can effectively spend giving any new piece of information appropriate attention in a way where you're unlocking new ways of writing about it as you go, the better. So here's my personal example. So let me explain the 3 essays that I had to write in English. So we had sections A and B, where essentially they would give you 2 prompts to pick from. So prompt A, prompt B, and you'd have, let's just say that's essay A, essay B, and there's another set of prompts as well that you can pick from. And these are essentially the essays from which you've done reading on the books during the year, or watching the movie, analyzing whatever, right? So this is stuff that we've already studied before. I would look at the prompts and I would think about what I could write for maybe like a minute tops, but I wouldn't commit myself to anything, because me personally, I would write one of these last.
Me personally, I wouldn't take that.
You wouldn't take that?
I'm just kidding. I don't know, whatever meme they say. No, me personally, I don't know. No, that's the strategy. Commitment issues, really. You need to have commitment issues with your prompts.
So then I'd actually go to section C. And what I'd do is I'd begin reading. I'd begin reading the common article that they give me. I'd look for abstract connections between the arguments, looking for points of evidence that you can use to separate yourself from the rest of the students. Remember, everyone here has the same piece of work to work with, which means the average student will write the average same thing. So if you want the examiner to give you a good mark, you have to stand out.
Be creative. Have psychoanalytical takes that other people have not thought of. Think outside the box. Don't write within the confines of whatever's obvious. If it's obvious to you, it's obvious to the guy next to you. Don't write it.
Yeah.
In English, the way exam marking works is they put your paper next to 200 other papers, then they order them one by one, right? If you have a sentence worse than the guy next to you, you get a mark lower. Don't put yourself in that position.
So I start with section C because it's a section that's not prepared. This is because majority of my reading time will be spent planning for this relatively unprepared essay. And I would much rather write an essay right after planning it than have to jump between planning this and then writing this, coming back to here, planning this, and then doing that. Okay? It just works a lot better to start with section C, in my opinion. So I would plan section C, but not A and B in my head during reading time. And once writing time starts, I would highly recommend putting this plan out on paper as well. You might ask why I don't plan for sections A and B as well. I don't plan for these essays yet, as I'm not writing them at that given moment in time. It's as simple as that. By planning these essays out beforehand during the reading time, I'm actually committing to writing what I've planned out, which is not a great thing if you're not writing that very essay immediately after. By committing, you lock yourself into rigid ideas that may not be the strongest for that given essay. But by waiting before or directly before section A and B, to actually plan that essay, you unlock yourself thinking time subconsciously while you write section C. I know it sounds a bit weird because you'll be busy writing section C. Even though you're not actively thinking about A and B, your subconscious is doing the work in the background. And we'll actually talk about that a bit later. Did you want to talk about the English language side of things? If it was a bit different.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing any other subject that's like linguistics, the exam is structured differently. But I know we have some people outside of the state, outside of Victoria, so I'll be very brief.
Mhm.
In English language, I would recommend that you get a feel for the exam. But in saying that, I would try to get as much of short answer done as possible in your head, right? So that you don't waste time reading in writing time. You want writing time to be as much writing as possible. And yeah, that's how I would consider it in Inlang. And I think that's enough because people aren't really doing Inlang in this webinar, I don't think.
Okay, so one of the most common uses of reading time for exams is to solve any multiple choice questions you can do in your head. Okay, you've probably heard that before. I'm going to be here to say that's probably not the best use of your time and that there are other better things that you can be doing during reading time. So here's what I do. I scope out the short answer questions as they're usually longer and more difficult and worth many more marks in the exam, just like Samantha said. I would go through chronologically, simply getting an idea of what the questions are asking in terms of content. I would almost be mentally answering them. Okay. I ask myself, oh, all right, what kind of question do I need to answer this particular question, 6A? I go through every question, almost running through the rough process of answering it in my head. Note that I don't actually answer the question like thinking, oh, I'm going to say this specific sentence or anything, just the rough process. I think about what questions are easiest and making sure I do those set of questions first, because at the end of the day, all marks are worth the same. And if I know how to go about the question comfortably, I simply move on to the next question and repeat.
And if you do reading time and you get a feel for the exam and what's the easiest that you should do first, etc., and you finish that in your reading time and you still have time, maybe then you can go to, multiple choice. If you've really thought it out and you've seen everything, you've done everything, then you can use your time on doing some of the short answer. Doing some of the multiple choice as soon as possible.
But let's just say, for example, I don't know every single answer to the exam. If I'm quite confused how to go about a particular question like this one, then I acknowledge that these curveball questions exist. There are always going to be a couple. I try to think about potential solutions, but I don't really spend more than 20 to 30 seconds. I take a mental note that, all right, question 7B is something that I'm struggling with quite a bit. That's it. So again, I acknowledge that the question exists. I try to think about potential solutions, and then I take a mental note of where it is.
And in the background, your brain's going to be trying to figure it out subconsciously while you do other questions. And by the time you get to it, you've passively processed it in the background and you forgot about it, but your brain was continuously thinking. So now that you've seen something that you can't remember, maybe you'll remember it by the time you get to it. And that's why you shouldn't spend your whole time doing just short answer. You get a scope and a feel for the exam every single time.
Exactly. So what most people do is do the multiple choice questions, which isn't that great of a use of time. Scoping out, like we've just done here, is good because it allows you to have a think about some of the tougher questions. So that's exactly what I would do. I'd scope out the multiple choice questions, then short answer, having a look at the general answer of how I'd go about it. And if I come across curveballs, I'd have a good think about it, but go on after around 30 seconds. And I utilize all of my reading time doing this. In fact, a couple of my year 12 exams, after writing time started, I'd still be reading, just so I had a general idea of what every single question expected of me. And just as a recap for English, read any material carefully. If there's multiple essays, look, but do not commit. That's my personal take. Some people might disagree. That's okay. And as for the essays themselves, plan before writing, always. Failing to plan is planning to fail. That's what my English teacher always used to say. But let's come back on this concept of subconscious processing. And we're going to begin with a little story. But essentially, subconscious processing is all about remembering certain things, even when you're not actively thinking about it. Now, I've definitely been this person a few times. And I want you to think of a time where maybe you were doing a test or an exam at school. And on this test, there was this one question that you could just not wrap your head around, no matter how long you tried to understand it. Maybe you sat there for 5 to 10 minutes, but still, no progress was made in that question. And you just kind of have to take an educated guess. But maybe on the way home in the car, or on the ride home in the bus, or maybe right as you're about to fall asleep, you remember the answer to the question. You figured out exactly what you needed to do, and you are kicking yourself for not having figured it out earlier. But it makes you think, how did you end up getting to that answer? On the bus home, or before you're going to sleep, chances are you're probably not thinking about question 4B from short answer. See, the answer lies in your brain. Your brain is a very complicated thing. The good thing is that for now, you don't need to know too much about it. Your brain is capable of a lot of different things, and one of them includes being able to process things in the background, even without actively thinking about them. That's what we were alluding to before. At any point in time, you can be actively thinking about certain things or thinking about them in the background. The reason you got to your answer when you did is because your brain was actually still processing the test question in the background, even if you were doing other things at the time. This is why so many people end up having light bulb moments a long time after the initial question is posed. It's also why you've got so many intriguing thoughts in the shower. Your brain is really good at doing all this background processing, and it's always trying to find answers to questions. So why do I say this? Number one is expose yourself to the question. Even if you cannot answer it straight away, you are still doing yourself a massive, massive favor by allowing your brain to process it. Number two, move on to the next question if you cannot understand how to answer the current one. Even if you move on, your brain is still processing the question. And you actually buy yourself more time to figure out these questions by doing this. And number three, expose yourself to all of the questions as soon as sensibly possible so that you can use this phenomenon to your advantage for all of the questions in the exam. Did you ever have a moment like this where just the answer just came to you?
Yes, yeah. All the time. On the way home in the car, the week after, 2 weeks after, and it haunted me. And, I'm lucky I've forgotten about it, but if I hadn't have, it would have continued to haunt me. Like in this moment to this day, it would have haunted me.
Yeah. So we all have those sort of events, and the idea behind this is that we want to have those events during the exam. So my example is that I knew about all this stuff, so I applied it directly to my BCE chemistry exam. And I remember this one question about eggs and proteins and vinegar.
Oh, I know this question.
The 2020 exam. Yeah. Dude, for the life of me, I couldn't get that question. That was actually the last question that I answered. I didn't know how it worked. Yeah. But this is the exact framework that I used to have a look at what it was, to try and think of solutions, to go through the entire exam and have all of that subconscious thinking time to answer the question. And it wasn't until the last 5 minutes of my exam I realized, the vinegar is an acid, eggs of albumin, a protein, maybe something to do with denaturing. And I'm like, there we go. That's the link. That's what I need to write. And it ended up saving me like 3 marks on the exam. And it was the very last question that I did. So very, very worthwhile. So the advantages of subconscious processing is that you know where the easy questions are and where the hard questions are. It means you get to avoid things chronologically, which is what our next topic is all about.
I don't know if you guys do karting or if you watch F1, but it's like before you start driving on the racetrack, you're not going to drive the racetrack before knowing what the whole racetrack looks like. So it's like familiarizing yourself with the whole circuit. And then you start from the beginning, sure, whatever. But you need to know where you're going at different points. You need to have an idea. That's why drivers do simulated racing. They practice the circuit before they get on the racetrack. And you need to know the circuit inside out before you start. That's why you read, you use your reading time.
That's such a good analogy. That's good. But yeah, essentially it allows you to prioritize the easy marks, and it leverages your brain's ability to process questions subconsciously, buying yourself more time overall during the exam. Now, we did mention the lapse of the oval, and I have to give a lot of credit to my year 11 HSD tutor who gave me this idea, and I've used this for every single exam from basically that HSD exam onwards. One of the biggest mistakes that you can make in your exam is to do everything chronologically. I'm so confident in saying that. If you want to make the biggest mistake, just do everything in order. If you want to maximize your mark on these exams, just remember one thing. All the marks are worth the same. And I need you to be in control of the exam instead of letting the exam control you. Don't feel restricted when you're doing the exams because there's no obligation for you to go top to bottom. Instead, understand that it is wiser to do questions in order of difficulty. This is because, once again, every single mark is worth the same.
And because they know that most students are going to go start to end, obviously they're not going to put the questions in increasing difficulty. They might start with a hard one to waste your time, then give you an easy, then give you a hard one, then an easy, then an easy, then a hard, right? Because what they're looking for is to get the students that are just doing it start to end to get caught out. It's a game, right? Play the game of the examiners. See all the easiest questions, do all the easiest ones first. See the next round of difficulty, then finish off with the most difficult ones, right? So at least you've secured all of the easy marks that are worth the same as all of the hard marks, right?
Exactly, because you don't get any extra points for getting a question right that only 9% of the states get right.
Which I wish it was the case, right? I wish it was scaled like that, because that way would reward those who really know what they're talking about, right? But ultimately, the game is, if you can be really good at all the easy stuff, you can be just as good as someone who's not good at the easy stuff, but somehow is just good at the hard stuff in the same magnitude. So focus on getting all the easy marks out of the way.
Because I want you to think about what happens if you run out of time at the end. Who cares? Because if you've gone in the order of difficulty, you've left the marks that only the very elite in the state will get correct anyways.
So if you didn't go in order, you would have wasted time and not gotten some of the marks you did anyway and run out of time. But at least you ran out of time and secured all the easy marks.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, when you get everything correct that you know you should have gotten correct, then that's a job well done. So I want you to imagine your exam like a multi-lap race around the oval. You've got multiple laps to go through the entire exam. And in each lap, you do a different type of question. In the first lap, you complete all of the easy questions. These are all the MCQs you can do quickly, or the easier short answer questions. I'd skip the multiple choice questions you might be confused on. In the second lap, you complete the moderate bulk of the exam, the questions you may have skipped the first time round. And in the third lap, you complete the differentiated questions, the ones that really a very low percentage of students actually get them correct. They're usually found, at the end of exams, or just difficult individual questions. They're questions that really no amount of revision or past questions would have prepared you for, instead requiring you to think outside of the box, utilizing all of the knowledge you have to solve a question. These are pretty common in maths exams, and almost all of the last questions in VC methods and Spec I did were examples of differentiated questions. Again, remember that if you don't finish this lap, it's okay, because breathe easy knowing you did your best, trying not to make any silly mistakes in lap 1 and 2. And I guarantee you that you will be in the top 10% of your state for that exam. This way, you avoid getting caught up on differential equations midway through exam. For example, I think I remember my HSD exam in 2019. The Big 10 marker was right in the middle. I made sure to leave that until the very last. And I think the stats were appalling. Like no one got like even 4 marks.
For
that question.
And to be honest, like I did HST as well. To be honest, because I didn't care about HST, I just did it in order, and I finished way early because I was even though I didn't do anything for HST, I was pretty good at the subject for someone that didn't do anything for it, and I still finished with so much extra time, and I really packed out that 10 marker at the end, and I got like I think one of the highest scores in the state because I had so much time because I was so quick at the other questions that I just poured all of my time into that final little 10 marker. And I just wrote everything that possibly came to mind. And it was basically an essay.
I'm not like that. I suck at writing and I'm very slow at writing. And I didn't actually get to finish my 10 marker at all. But what I did do is make sure that I was able to answer every other question that I could to the best of my ability. And it almost felt like a perfect exam outside of that 10 marker. And that got me the 48. I did, which puts me in the top 0.6% of the state, even without touching that 10 marker, basically.
He's untouchable. He didn't even touch the 10 marker and he still got a 48.
So the intention behind the first lap is really to build momentum. It's to build yourself that, oh, wow, okay, I can do these easy questions. Let me get into the rhythm of writing and solving questions. Because what skipping the hard questions allows you to do is stop the disruption of rhythm during a writing intensive exam like HSD or English or legal study. I mean, English, you can't really skip stuff, but like legal or HSD. These tough questions can also destroy your ability to secure easier marks at the end of exams due to time pressure as well. So it's just a win-win if you approach things in the order of difficulty. And a quick note that I just wanted to say, when I say do the easy questions, I mean like the overarching questions, not the individual short answers. For example, if question 4 of short answer looks easier than question 3 of short answer, do question 4 before question 3. However, Like if question 4E happens to be one of those differentiated questions and you have no idea how to attempt it, take a mental note of it and skip it and then come back to question 3 or do the rest of it and then come back to this at the end.
Like each individual mark allocated section to put an answer in is what you should be considering based on difficulty. You might love question 4A and hate question 4B, right? You don't need to do all of question 4 because you picked to do question 4A. Just skip question 4B, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's how you end up building that momentum. And this last little bit is external trigger exposure. Once again, the TLDR is just skip questions when you don't know how to do them. But I want you to think about a time where you smelt something familiar, or you ate something familiar, or you even saw something in the distance that looked a bit familiar. And it reminded you maybe of a time where you went on vacation with your family, or another good memory. You can probably tell that whatever you smelt, you tasted, or you saw was a trigger for this memory. So let's put that in an academic context, and let's imagine that you see this question that you have no idea how to go about, right? What is a thermochemical equation? You're sitting here, you have no idea what's going on, 10 to 20 seconds pass, and you decide, oh, bro, it's just not worth my time. So you decide to skip to another question. And all of a sudden, in the other sections, you see this question. You can comfortably answer this question, right? But guess what? It also helps you with this question that you skipped earlier. Why? Because it gives you a thermochemical equation to basically copy paste and apply into here.
And that's why it's so valuable to read the whole exam, especially in chemistry, because you can actually use the content they bring into other questions to answer other questions before it. But obviously they order it in such a way that they're not expecting you to have seen something before you answer it. So that's why you go through it and you're aware of the map and the circuit, as I said, like it's an F1 race.
Exactly. And just another example is just, let's just say you have no idea how to go about this question. Like I probably still have no idea how to go about this question, but maybe this rings a few bells and you're like, oh, I need to integrate. And then you're like, oh my God, maybe I need to integrate for this as well. So not only does it help, do you know how to answer this question, but you also have a light bulb moment of how to go about this question as well. So external trigger exposure is all about exposing yourself to as many questions as possible, even if the trigger to one question is found in another question. And skip questions when you can't solve it quickly, because by exposing yourself to other triggers, you increase your chances of solving the skipped question. Any questions? Time for a little break. That was intense. That was heavy. How are we doing? Are there any questions come through? This is pretty much how I approach all of my exams. Apart from English, because it's a bit different, but I went through that. It's all about the order of difficulty. And
to be honest, even in English, I know some people that prioritize section C over section A or go backwards and forwards. When planning for an essay, would you also write down what you'll include in each paragraph, like specifics or a rough idea? As much as you need to be comfortable to not forget the concepts that are in your mind. If you can remember it without writing it, do that.
Alrighty, so we'll try and get started in 2 minutes time with the next section, which is all about mindset. Which is a favorite of both Sapanta and I.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite section to talk about. There's nothing that's more valuable than mindset, and you need to be in the right frame of mind to perform. It makes it very difficult to perform if you're not in the right frame of mind. Would it be a good idea to memorize the answer schemes to ensure you follow the structure they're looking for? Yes, sure. Any tips for bumping up method scores quickly and efficiently? Well, that's on Farhan, not me. I mean, I could talk about it, but he's probably better to talk about that.
I just did a lot of practice, and I think I know I sound like a broken record, but it's a process of learning effectively. So learning and revising or studying.
To be honest, we have a common friend from uni. who he scored like a raw 50 in methods. And he said his way of scoring raw 50 in methods was just doing a million exams to the point where any question he saw, he'd done before and he knew what to do robotically rather than conceptually.
Probably know a different too.
Yeah. The person that asked that question knows that person. But if you want to make it quick and efficient, to be honest, I would just do as many questions as possible in as little time as possible. Look how they're answered. Work from that. And based on that, if you're really stuck on concept, watch YouTube videos about how maths actually works, because then you can apply it to the real world, right? That can be an efficient way to just jump the gap. For bio, when should I be doing the most recent VCA exams? Many people have advised me to wait until the end.
I agree.
Yeah, Farhan agrees.
Just exactly what I did. Maybe set out a week before your bio exam to not do all that much, just to like kind of do soft revision.
Yeah.
But
and give a couple days between your last practice exam and your actual exam to go through the hardest exams you've done. Any tips for scoring highly on chem? Understand it conceptually and do a lot of questions. How do you best separate yourselves in short answer or extended response questions in like PE or bio? How do you go from a 10 to 12 or like a 9 to a 10, etc.? Okay, all right. Do you have like when you're doing these exams, right? Do you get them marked by anyone? Do they give you any feedback? Seeking feedback is really helpful in subjects like PE and bio, right? But also work based on the mock answers to the questions that you get wrong. They're mock answers because they are there for a reason and they are designed to be valid, valuable answers, right?
Can I comment on that for a second? So I think with bio, you see that a lot of the sciences are very keyword heavy. So essentially they want to see the word that they want to see. So something like the process of transcription and translation comes up in like every exam, but that's something you can almost just memorize because they're looking for specific words. And the way you can do that is going up to the exam report and saying, okay, in past years, what is a model response for this? And then just kind of being able to memorize that basically. But of course, memorization is a lot easier when you understand stuff conceptually. We already know that. So include the keywords from the exams is what I'm trying to say. And this is what I applied for HSD, but I would do a lot of the questions. I would get the exam report answers, but then I would also go above and beyond, showing my extra knowledge about the topic by just putting in little incidentals here and there. Like, for example, you could say X, Y, and Z causes a reduction in sanitation, which could increase the
probability of
waterborne diseases, for example.
Yeah.
And then you'd put in a little such as cholera. And then that would elevate your answer into like, okay, this guy probably knows what they're talking about.
Because they've given a valid example. Another thing is, don't write wasted sentences. Write a sentence a mark, right? If the examiner reads a sentence, they should be able to give you a mark for that sentence because you've said something valuable enough to deserve a mark. If it's 12 marks, think of it as I need 12 valuable points to give this guy for him to feel like I actually deserve 12 marks. He needs to see 12 things or slightly more.
Yeah.
Right. Think of it like that strategically. And if you can't think of enough things to write, you probably don't know the content well enough, which goes back to learn the content better. I
think that was my strength and weakness, because in English, I would be super robotic and formulaic in my writing that my teacher said, you needed some more freedom when you write. But with stuff like HSD or the sciences, it was like to the point, almost dot point form, as in like this sentence is for this mark, cause and effect, this equals that.
They actually recommend dot points in chemistry, in chem exams, in VC. Like my teacher was like, we love dot points, just give us dot points. We don't want to see any more words than dot points, right? Give me a dot point a mark or a dot point per 2 marks, right? As so long as you're covering the marks that you know the exam report wants you to hit.
Yeah, the principle is the same. Make your stuff as like short and concise as it needs to be, so that it's as easy as possible for the examiner to give you the mark.
All right, guys, I think we should get into it.
Yeah, lovely stuff.
If you have any more questions, just keep them coming. We'll get to them in break times. We'll get to them.
But before we get into stress management, what do you guys do to deal with stress? Pop it in the chat box. Let's see what we're doing.
Yeah, like if you're stressed or anxious, whether it be about school or life, what measures do you actually take? Like, I mean, what do you do?
What's
measures?
your plan?
Yeah, do you have a plan? Do you know that you're going to get over it? How do you mentally navigate it? Go on a walk. Beautiful. That's a really good strategy. Yeah, how it should be. Yeah, what else?
When someone asks you, what do you do to manage stress? What do you respond?
Physical activity, tennis, boxing, chess, beautiful. Go on a run outside, spend time with family, really good. Remember the big picture, exactly. Be motivated by the big picture. Yeah, really good. Exercise, write everything down.
Yeah, good as.
Yes. Writing down your thoughts in a journal, in a structured format, very important. Keeping track of what you're thinking of at different times. Having a way to look at how far you've come is also helpful. Stare at a wall, underrated, to be honest.
This guy knows the source. We're gonna talk about that.
Staring at the ceiling, oh my God.
Alrighty, fantastic. So good to see. We've got another one as well. Sometimes it helps to ramp up, so I have less time to feel stressed.
Hey, bro.
Damn.
Bro, he's real for
that. Basically, what I wanted to cover with that, and what I wanted to define, is dealing with stress. To me, dealing with stress is actively engaging with the things that stress you out, or increasing your capacity for your mind and body to deal with the stress that you're experiencing. What it isn't is simply distracting yourself from the stress. So like things like video games, like Netflix, things that just generally distract you from whatever you're experiencing. The difference is like something like exercise. It does distract you from the stress, right? But it also increases your body's ability to deal with that stress, which is why I frame it as a positive thing.
And at the same time, you'd always rather run towards your problems than run away from them. Because if you run away from them, they'll chase you forever. But if you run towards them, you can get rid of them forever.
100%. And we'll talk about that soon. So when it comes to what you can do to improve your stress management, it's really down to these things. To increase your capacity, you're looking at eating better, exercising, and sleeping really well. And if you want to actively engage with the stress so you can deal with it, it's all about giving yourself the space to think. Now, we mentioned sleep. And I know I could bore you for hours on end with this sleep stuff, but I'm just going to give you 10 quick tips to help you regulate your body clock and improve your sleep quality. Okay, just take my word on it. I've been doing this stuff since year 10 and still on the grind of trying to improve my sleep. Essentially, tip number 1, limit blue light exposure after sunset, because blue light comes from your devices and screens, such as your phone and laptop. This mimics the light that is from the sun. And the sun activates the systems within your body that tells you to wake up. And essentially, blue light after sunset creates a false illusion that the sun is still up. So no wonder it makes it harder for you to sleep. So to limit blue light, rely on lamps instead of overhead bulbs. Turn on night shift or blue light filters on your devices at the sunset. And you might even want to download something called f.lux, which is essentially a really good blue light filter for your screen.
And actually, what Farhan and I do in our day-to-day, this is pretty crazy, but we actually put our phones onto grayscale. Right? I don't know. Yeah, fine.
Let's still on grayscale.
They're always on grayscale. So my phone has no color. I can't see color on my phone. And what does that do? It forces me to look up into the real world and touch some grass if I want to see color. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, so my phone's always on grayscale, for real. Yeah, I don't have color. I don't see color.
My phone is actually really boring, which is why I don't use it.
And that's how you should be. Like, you don't, yeah, exactly.
I also have these Blue Box glasses. They're not called Blue Box anymore. They're called Bond Charge. Essentially, this is blue light blockers. If you want to invest in them, feel free to, because they're good. You don't need to, they're quite expensive. Tip number 2, get daytime sunlight. Give your eyes visual stimulus to the sun. I just told you blue light was bad during the sunset time, during the evening, but blue light is incredible during the daytime because it helps you regulate that rhythm. It actually makes you tired when you should be tired. So get daytime sunlight, especially right after you wake up. Be consistent. Tip number 3, try to wake up and sleep at the same time every day, including the weekends, because your body can't tell the difference between a Monday and a Sunday. So aim to have a wake up and sleep window of around 30 minutes to an hour. So for example, wake up anywhere from 7 to 8 and sleep anywhere from 9 to 10. but try and keep that as consistent as possible. So this is what an average school night's rest was like for me. I actually have the ring on me. It's called an Aura ring. Again, don't invest in it. It's expensive, but it tracks your sleep. This is what the average school night was for me. I would sleep at 10. I'd wake up around 7:30, and you get your deep sleep here and your REM sleep here. The reason I want to point this out is because you can see this little REM sleep, right? Why that's important is because the REM sleep is actually where all of the connections are being made in your brain. Literally the connections of knowledge that you have. So if you're cutting your sleep in half and you're not getting basically any REM sleep, you are depriving your brain's ability to learn. It's simple as that. So get as much sleep as you need. Number 4, dial down on caffeine. Student culture nowadays seems to be to gulp down like multiple coffees per day. I can't believe people are actually doing this during high school.
I can't believe people are actually drinking coffee. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm in uni. I don't even drink.
I could never do it. People are addicted to it though. Personally, I never have caffeine past 12 p.m. I would suggest the same for everyone. When I rarely did have caffeine, it was like a matcha green tea instead, because green tea, for your fun fact information, contains L-theanine, which offsets the jitters of caffeine. And I usually only had caffeine on days where I would welcome like a mental boost, on days of like SACs and exams.
I mean, I have coffee for the taste personally. If I ever have it, it's not an energy thing for me. I would avoid energy drinks and synthetic forms of energy. Get better sleep, drink more water, get more sunlight.
Take a cold shower.
Cold shower, stimulate.
Yeah. Number 5, perform some exercise during the day, because exercise releases cortisol. Cortisol should be released during the morning. It helps you sleep on time. It just makes you tired. Number 6, don't have dinner too late. Every single time I have had dinner late, my heart rate is elevated. I can tell again through the ring, and that's not good. Makes your sleep of worse quality. Number 7, cool down your bedroom, please, especially during the Australian summer. Like, it is terrible. Turn your AC on if you can. In fact, probably my worst exam during year 12 was my methods tech 3. I can remember I just could not sleep the night before because of the heat, and it's just bad. So do what you can to cool down your bedroom. I think the optimal temperature is around 19 to 20 degrees Celsius. 8, black out your room. Any source of light that is coming into your room, get rid of it. Even if it's like the small little LED lights from your like chargers, from the multi-port that you've got, from your monitor, anything. Just put a piece of tape over it and try and keep your blinds closed. Number 9, take a breather. Consider following some guided meditation to help walk you through the process of relaxation. But essentially, slow and mindful breathing induces a parasympathetic response, which gets you into the rest and digest mode. And this gets you ready for bed. And number 10, stop mouth breathing. Studies have shown that breathing through the nose during your sleep helps people get more restful sleep. If any of you guys know Erling Haaland, the insane soccer player right now, the beast of a human being, he actually tapes his mouth while he sleeps as well. And if you're interested in why this stuff works, feel free to look up breath or search up James Nestor, I believe is the author, who kind of made this stuff a bit more mainstream. I used to do it. I put my mates on it as well that used to snore, and they've reported quite good benefits. So that's all about trying to improve your capacity to deal with stress. Now, on some stress management stuff. I think personally, it's a bit of a superpower. Those who are able to manage their stress and anxiety have that superpower, not just for academic pursuits, but for all events in life. Managing your stress can help you build up the mentality you need to squeeze out the extra percentiles for your ATAR, essentially. Being able to avoid getting psyched out before your exams as well. Look, for me, personally, I've always been an anxious person. It's probably what has made me who I am today. Getting into med school is quite a stressful process. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of feeling hopeless, a lot of distracting myself using social media and games. I was guilty of it as anyone. But the one way I put myself back on track was through stress management. So whenever exams come around, people are always on social media gossiping instead of taking action, right? So I would say avoid comparing your scores to others. Just try and detox social media. You don't really need it. I mean, what's your view on this? Where do you see the social media space?
I don't know. I don't think you should. I don't think it's realistic to ask people to like get rid of social media. I use social media. I'm a pretty active social media user, but it's a matter of like being mature enough to put it aside when you need to and get the job done. Right. You need to have the control on it. You can't be addicted to it mindlessly and lie down on the bed doom scrolling TikTok for 4 hours, which I know it happens. It's happened to me before.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. And also like usually people that talk the most about their exam scores and their practice exam marks and whatever, they normally don't be doing all that on the real thing. Like I'm sorry, like, it's just how it's been in my history, right? It's just how it goes.
My perspective is that it's hard to do things when you've got so much being thrown at your way through social media. So what I did during year 12 was just said, boys, I'm moving over to Facebook Messenger. Let's just have a group chat there. If you guys want to stay on Instagram, by all means, I'm just going to delete the app and just message you guys on Messenger. And thankfully, I had a group of friends that were listening enough to do that for me.
And for themselves as well.
Yeah.
Like, because they cared about themselves as well. So they listened to that and they knew that Farhan was, speaking facts. And in terms of like family and friends, use them. If you have a strong support system at home, it's very important.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, these people know how much this exam means to you. Let them know how seriously you're taking the exam, because communication is key in letting them understand that you might not be able to give them as much time. So, let loose with all the effort that you're putting in. It's normal to feel a bit burnt out. And a burnt out mind is not one that you want to bring into your exam. This is why I recommend like a few days of just relaxing before your exams. So I remember some of the best nights I had was just like
doing nothing, to be honest. Yeah. Sometimes you need to do nothing, but don't plague doing nothing with doing things that fry your brain. If you're going to do nothing, do something valuable, right? If you're not going to study, do something worth your time. So proper relaxation, once again, is not wasting time, and it's necessary for optimal performance.
That's probably the one thing that I needed to hear in year 11 as well.
Once again, though, don't waste your time doing things that fry your brain, please. Got a message in chat, put a timer for 10 minutes and cry, then get back to study.
Stress management?
Oh, man.
Number 1 tip.
Oh, man, no. That one's so real. No, don't be doing that. If you're really at that point, then take some intervention. Leave the house, honestly. Take a deep breath and some fresh air. You need it. You need to reset your brain, right? Dopamine detoxes, months coming up to your UCAT. It's imperative to, to keep your motivation, keep your habits as high as you can. And habit is much more powerful than motivation. And, when you're preparing for UCAT, you're in a pressure cooker. There is nothing more high pressure than preparing for the UCAT. Not even preparing for exams, because UCAT is a 2-hour exam that determines almost everything. Right. The ATAR, you have so many opportunities on to compensate for over and over again.
But realistically as well, the ATAR is like such a long, drawn out process of you being in that zone of performance.
Yeah.
It is very stressful to be in that situation.
So you got to be on autopilot a little, right? And so a lot of these people are spending all their time in some limbo zone. I don't know, like dreaming about relaxing while they study, stressing about studying and the UCAT while trying to relax. You got to separate that. Right? You got to separate studying and relaxing, right? If you're going to spend time with your friends, you spend time with your friends and you completely separate from study. If you're going to study and you separate your focus from anything else, right? That's first and foremost, right? Nothing more important than that. And we've covered what you do when you're stressed. So, staring at a wall, honestly, it's a break from everything. If you're staring at a wall, sometimes you might feel like you're an overthinker, right? And truth is that a lot of us distract ourselves with other activities to avoid thinking about what is stressing us out. What if, it's almost as if your brain is telling you to think about it, but you're avoiding it. So what if you just think about it as much as possible? Then you can get rid of it. Stare at a wall. Jokes aside, stare at a wall. Dedicate 1 hour of your time for every evening to do everything that you feel like you enjoy and need to do and think about, and give your mind the space to, have the time that it needs, right? Think for as long as you need, right? It's very relieving and it's very smoothing, very soothing, right? The things to think about, your problems, why are they stressing you out? A step-by-step process, right? How are you going to actually go about solving your issue? Does it really matter? Does it not matter? That's a big one. Why are you stressing about it? Right? Writing down the next step you can take, writing down a plan, jotting it down in a journal, right? And I guess, yeah, that's the most important things that I can think of. Now, when it comes to a winner's mentality, right? Let's do an exercise. I mean, I want you guys to get a piece of paper. I want you guys to write down what you want to achieve as an ATAR, or like put it in your notes app. I mean, what do you dream to get? What's your ideal world? And what would keep you completely fulfilled? And then write down, what do you honestly expect to get, realistically expect to get, being completely honest with yourself. And I want you guys to write both down. And then it's going to be your job to decipher why or why not your number's not where it needs to be, or it is where it needs to be, and whose fault that is.
Just write the numbers down for now. And we'll give you a minute to do that. Right. So hopefully you've got your numbers down now. And at this point, I can see there's a bit of a delay in the stream, so we can't really do this in real time, unfortunately, but I want you to do another exercise. And I'm going to assume, because it just happens with everyone, that your goal ATAR is different to the ATAR that you think you're going to get. There's a bit of a gap. And the ATAR that you think you're going to get is probably a bit lower than what your goal ATAR is. So the next exercise is, I want you to list out every single reason for the gap between the dream and realistic achievements.
Yeah, so why? Like, what is the actual issue here, right? It's very important to consider. Why can't you do that, right? You need to target that, and you need to attack that point. Like, if at some point I thought, oh man, I can't do the UCAT, why? Well, okay, maybe, maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I don't know where I'm going. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. So figure it out. Talk to someone who knows. Make a plan. What else reasoning do you have? What other reasoning do you have? We don't really have many excuses to make if you really structure your thoughts adequately, right?
And be completely honest with yourself. Like, what's the mental dialogue going on right now? Is it like, oh, I'm not good enough to get that 99 or whatever I'm shooting for? Or people from my ends just don't get there. My culture, it's not within my genes to get there. I'm not smart enough. What are the reasons? Right? This is exactly what we want to get through. Just real talk. List out every single reason you can.
It's important. We need to think about these things, because these are the limiting factors that are going to stop you from getting where you need to go. It's very important to target these.
Right. So hopefully you've done that. And now I want to get into the kind of mentality side of things. So my first point is raise your standards, because cohort after cohort, the students who have the highest belief in their ability to achieve astounding grades are most often the ones who achieve this incredible feat. They may not exactly achieve their goal, but they get very, very, very close. And there's a saying, shoot for the moon and you'll land somewhere among the stars.
And also be calculated, right? Like, if you're not ready to face failure, work hard enough so that you don't actually have to face failure. Right? That was my strategy. I was like, I'm not ready to face failure, so I'm going to make sure that I don't face failure. How am I going to do that? By putting everything aside and making sure that I'm not going to face failure.
Because at the end of the day, we all get what we tolerate. If you want to tolerate not getting the mark that you want to get, your dream, then you will end up in that space. So in every area of life, you accept what you tolerate. If you're resigned to accepting average, you'll only ever receive average. So what's your language? Turn your shoulds into musts. Like, I should do some practice today if I want to get a high ATAR. Is pretty low chance of success. Because like, I should do this, should do that. I can't be bothered, too tired. If someone's with the mindset, like, I must do some practice today if I want to get that goal, then there's a high chance of success. And it's the shift in tonality, a shift in mentality.
Yeah,
with that one
shift
word.
in modality. And like if we're talking grammatically, right? Like, honestly, if you're going for something and you're not ready to put in the work, be ready to fail. I'm so sorry to tell you. If you really want something and you're not going to put in the work, be ready for failure. But if you're not ready for failure, then you're going to wake up every morning and put in the effort. Because at least in the end, you can look in the mirror and know that you did everything that you could. And that's winner's mentality, right?
So the reason why this works is because your mindset has the ability to influence your ATAR from its origin, which is you. Because your mindset impacts your thoughts, thinking, I must be doing some mindful practice in order to succeed at this endeavor. Your thoughts impact your actions. I do some mindful practice. Your actions impact your results, because mindful practice leads to an increase in your grades. And your results impact your mindset, An increase in grades increases your confidence and consolidates a high-performing mindset. It is a literal cycle that begins with your mindset that affects your results.
Right. So, we have positive beliefs, we have negative beliefs, right? You always should believe that you're 100% capable of achieving what you need to believe. And we should actively remove negative beliefs that we have. And what matters more so than everything is that you're putting in the work, right? The fact that you put in the work, right? Once you get to where you want to go, it's always like, what's next? The result is never that nice and sweet. The journey is always more sweet, right? Now, this was a little section that I made very specific to almost a brutal form of thinking, right? You need to find your reasoning. Like, what do you want to prove, right? Like, every single one of our actions have intention, right? So use those intentions to drive you and make it habit. But this only works if you actually want things enough, or if your intentions and desires are strong enough. There is nothing more difficult than asking a human to willingly do something that they don't want to do. If you put a human into an empty room with autonomy, they can do whatever they want, right? And you ask them to do a task that they really don't want to do, chances are they won't do it unless there's some sort of pressure on them to do it. Humans avoid doing things that they don't want to do. So figure out why you want to do something and then want to do it. So that way you actually do it. And this is why it's so unbelievably important to learn to be hungry for what you desire, right? If as a human, you're not hungry, you're not going to eat. So desire it deeply, and so deeply that it's constantly on your mind until you attain that goal. And some people might say that that's toxic and consuming, but if you're really not ready to face failure, this is the way that you need to approach things. A lot of the most successful people in the world approach things brutally like this. Anyone who says that that's too overwhelming or too overbearing, a lot of times, the people that don't take things seriously enough, they don't make it in the end, right? In a healthy manner, keep it on your mind and don't be fulfilled until you get there, right? Be proud of yourself for your effort, but make sure that you attain that goal if you want it enough. Right? You need to really figure out why and how much you actually want something. You can actually shift your luck by, being more than good enough, right? Like, luck is not a concept if you're good enough. When Lewis Hamilton wins 7 F1 years in a row, 7 years in a row, he was the fastest driver on the grid. That was not luck, right? Luck does not work when you guarantee as much of the outcome as possible, right? Luck is only a factor if you're not doing enough work. Right? Cover for every gap, be hungry and chase that goal viciously. Think about those who want the same goal who are ahead of you. Those who you need to get ahead of that are working just as hard as you, maybe smarter than you, maybe harder than you, right? And I guess the question to ask is like, what would a 99 plus ATAR scorer do if they were in my position? Unsure what to do with your time, catch yourself scrolling, social media, feeling lazy, just not doing enough work and not prioritizing what you need to prioritize, right? So this section is very important, and I really want to emphasize this. You need to know if you actually want something or not, and figure out why you want it. And if you desire it, then put in the work. Otherwise, you will have to deal with failure, and that's just life. And sometimes it'll take a while, and time is not the issue. Regret of not putting in effort is the issue. I don't care if it takes you 10 years to get where you want to go. What matters is that you got there in the end, right? And you put in the effort all the way. If you give up now, you will face failure forever, right? It's just a reality that we have to deal with. It's quite brutal, but it's, we're realists here. As I said at the start, we're not here to sugarcoat and tell you that something's going to magically appear in your hands. Every single result and outcome that you strive for is something that you must viciously work for. That is life in its realest form.
The only real failure is not giving it your all. I fundamentally believe it.
Like, to me, failure is more so like regret. We've got Seb as the next David Goggins. No, I couldn't do what David Goggins did. David Goggins, if it was like, I don't know, talking about English language or something. No, not David Goggins in the military. That's crazy.
I like to ask myself this question so many times. Like, what would a 99 plus ATAR? You can replace that with anything. Like, if you wanted to be a better brother to someone, what would a good brother do if they were in my position? When you get to the stage, like, maybe if you're in a relationship, like, what would a good partner do if they were in my position, right? Just keep on asking yourself that question and you will come up with the answer. And it's just all about doing the stuff that you already need to do and following through with that. So whenever I find myself like scrolling on Facebook or whatever, the question just always pops up. What would someone that wants to like actually improve their life by doing my position. And this always helps me get me back on track. And just on this stuff as well, right? Find your reason. Your reason doesn't always need to be like a noble, oh, I want to change the world. It'd be fantastic if we had a lot of people in the world that wanted to change things for the better, a lot of innovators, a lot of creators, but at the end of the day, that's not realistic. So what's your reasoning? Right? Be honest with yourself. Sometimes that can be like real personal stuff. Like maybe you want to prove to yourself that you're capable of this one thing that you want to achieve. Maybe it's to prove to other people. Sometimes in like immigrant backgrounds as well, it's a lot of pressure from the parents. Maybe you want to prove to them that you're capable of getting something, and just being able to justify that to them. Whatever that reason is, find that reason and be hungry for it.
Beautiful.
Sick. So a question that we got when we were trying to figure out what to do in the contents for today was, you guys wanted to see what to do the day before the exam. So here's exactly how I went about it. Take it easy, because your best performances come when you are fresh. 100% stand by that. Reduce any form of decision fatigue. So what is decision fatigue? It's where, in the morning you have to make a few decisions, and that brings you it's just stress that builds up over the day. Okay. So let's just go down all the way. Let's say you wake up and all of a sudden your pens are missing. Oh, now you're a bit stressed. You got to get your pens from wherever they were yesterday. And now you're looking at your wardrobe. You're not sure what you're going to wear. You're looking at the pantry. There's nothing for you to eat before your big exam. And you have no idea what you're going to do. You don't know what your ritual is. See, it's quite stressful. And you want to reduce any of that decision fatigue that is going to come during the day. So what do? I sort out my pencil case the night before. I know exactly what I'm going to wear. I actually had an exam outfit. A lot of my friends make fun of that for me, but
yeah, I don't know. That's really goofy. I don't know why bro had an exam outfit. Personally, I wouldn't do that.
No, but I'd actually do like practice exams in that outfit, so I could associate performance with that outfit. But you don't need to do that. Just make sure you know what you're going to wear. What you're going to eat. Have a big breakfast, right? Protein and healthy fats. Make sure they are rich in whatever you choose to eat. So scrambled eggs are always good, unless you're allergic. And try to have a source of protein in there as well. Because you'll find protein and healthy fats are the things that help you stay satiated during the day. You won't get the hunger pangs during lunchtime or whatever. In fact, during year 11 and 12, I actually ate exclusively 2 meals a day. Just heavy protein and healthy fat rich stuff. I'm not saying that I recommend it necessarily. I'm just saying that it will get the job done if you don't want to feel hungry throughout the day.
Yeah, bro's kidneys are suffering for real.
They actually are. So, and have an idea of what you're going to do in the morning as well. So for me, my ritual was I'm going to take a warm shower in the morning because it helps me de-stress. I'm going to see some sunlight when I'm waking, and I would always go into a deep squat with the sunlight in my eyes, drinking some tea. That was my ritual every morning before my exams. And I would do that without fail. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. But my personal preference is to avoid pre-exam and post-exam talk. So everyone's going to be lining up outside the gymnasium before they go into the exam. They're going to be talking, oh, do you know this, do you know that? Just a lot of chatter. Me personally, not the biggest fan of that. Because I just want to be in the mindset, like, I want to be calm heading into that exam. And like, to me, if I'm being really honest, the 5 minutes of conversation I have with someone beforehand probably won't save me like the marks that I'm looking for.
Yeah, if you're well prepared enough, you won't need to talk to anyone about anything before your exam. So make it your mission to be well prepared enough so that you'll never have to rely on the 5 minutes before the exam in a brief conversation. Now, in saying that, I don't even think I was that good in some subjects. I was always talking before the exam. To be honest, like sometimes I was in a pretty toxic environment. I was always talking my talk, listening to other people talk their talk. Like, oh, okay, we'll see how this exam goes. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just talk it out. And sometimes for me, talking it out relieves stress. I liked talking about it. Or I would see my teacher and I'd just talk to her about whatever I was about to do. And yeah, she'd give like a little pep talk or whatever. And it was like a year's worth of work coming up to the exam. So it was like, it was cool to just talk to her right before I went into the gymnasium to do the exam. Yeah.
Post-exam talk is something I hated though. I still hate to this day. I don't know how people can do it, but it's like, you know, right after you do the exam, people are like, oh, what'd you get for this? What'd you get for that? Like, what does it achieve? You can't change anything anymore. And in fact, there was so many times where I just walked out the exam and we're doing the talking stuff. And then it's like, damn, I got that question wrong. And then it just puts you in a negative frame of mind going into the future. And it's all good if that's your last exam because you've got nothing else to worry about. But if that's your first exam and you've got 5 more, then now you've got quite a bit of stuff to worry about. You're like, oh my God, now I have to make up for that mistake that I did. When really, like, you can't change anything. So for me, I was always a fan of avoiding post-exam talk.
And if you want to engage in post-exam talk, you got to be mature enough to compartmentalize it and say, okay, that's irrelevant anyway. I got to grind harder for the next one. Because I always participated in post-exam talk. Yeah, always.
One thing as well is avoid your phone. For me, in the mornings, I would never touch my phone. Before any exam, I think the phone is the number one thing that reduces your IQ during the morning. Like if you wake up and you're like, damn, let me check my phone, the messages. Let me tell you, the messages are still going to be there. They're not going to move, right? And if your friends are real ones, they'll realize that like you'll message them after the exam. It's fine. Just avoid your phone before the exam. You want to make your brain, your mind as clear as possible. And anything that you put into your brain before that exam can serve as a bit of a cloud, a bit of a haze going into your exams. That's my personal preference. So I recommend for everyone, just if you've got a big exam, especially in the mornings, avoid looking at your phone because there's no need to.
So I guess our goal is to give you all the tools that you need to be exam ready.
That was our goal at the beginning.
Right.
Have we achieved that? You guys let us know, right?
Got to head off now. Thanks so much for the run through. You're very welcome, David. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, that's all good. I think we were just about to head into the open Q&A anyway.
Yeah, so we basically finished all the content. There's some important stuff to talk about though.
Before that, yeah. Because if you're in year 12 and you scored well on the UCAT and you're working on your ATAR, but you're confused about med interviews, then this is for you, right? Look, the plan isn't to like pitch this to you or sell this to you, but we do want you to be aware of
it. Just exists. It's something that exists. If you want to seek that out for support, if you want to get into medicine, you can come to us for that.
So we'll just put that into the chat right now.
That's the link. Interview. Yeah, in case you're interested, you can sign up using this link.
And if you're in year 11 and you want to get into undergrad med and you know how important the UCAT is, but you don't know where to begin, then this is for you. Yes. And again, same thing. It just exists. If it sounds like something that you'd be interested in, then we're going to pop that into the chat box right now as well.
Just in case anyone wants to participate or have access to that course. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Beautiful.
And lastly, if you're an ambitious student and you're trying to get into med, and no matter your year level or your state, then this is for you, the Med Prep School family.
So we've just got a Discord where like we've got a community of students that are motivated and they talk to one another, they ask questions, they provide support to one another. It's a beautiful community. You don't lose anything by joining it. It's completely free. We highly recommend it. And this is the invite link.
Yeah. So look, what if all it did was help you get the score that you need, like it did for this person, right? Or what if all it did was give you the motivation or reignite the motivation that you already had, right? Because at the end of the day, your community matters, but we also believe that everyone deserves access. And this is why we give away so much of what we do for free. So if you're interested in joining our Discord channel, then please feel free to click on the link in the chat right now, and it'll be all yours. So let's get into it. Open Q&A time. If you've got any questions, now is the time. We'll stick around for around 15 to 20 minutes, just answering any questions that you have. The floor is yours.
Feel free. Do we have any questions? Anything to ask?
Okay, so some questions coming through. Let's see.
How many practice exams did you guys end up doing for each subject? I have the statistics. I'll tell you exactly how many I did for each subject. I actually have the exact statistics. All right. Second. All right, practice exam data. So I did 0 for health and human development. I did 9 for art. I did 19 for chemistry. I did 24 for maths or methods, and I did 8 for English. So in total, it was about 60. I planned on doing 162. I only ended up doing about 60. Yeah, that's my exact statistics. And throughout all of year 12, I spent 291 recorded hours studying, which comes out to about an hour a day of school. So for each day of school, I studied about an hour a day cumulatively to the end. And I started practice exams pretty much soon after my UCAT, which was pretty much soon after the 31st of July or something. I think that's when my UCAT was. Farhan probably knows it better than me. Farhan at the time, he was my mentor. Yeah, so something like that. Yeah. Is it possible to send the study schedule on how to plan out? Yeah. Send your emails into chat. I will record them if you're interested in that.
Don't do that.
Wait.
Because it'll come up in the chat replay. Don't do
Okay,
that.
okay. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah. Hold on.
I'll keep on answering the questions. You want to make a Google form real quick?
All right, sure.
All right. So, I wanted to show real quick as well, just on my take on how many I did. So this was the mistake document I was talking about earlier. So you can see it real time. But chemistry, I did this many. Spec, I did that many. The good thing about making this mistake document as well is that what you can do is at the end of it is just print all of this stuff out as a bound reference. That's what I did. But yeah, you can see the tech free and all of that they all go in there. And yeah, so that's how many I did in year 12. For my year 11 subjects, I didn't do all that many. And as you can see here as well, I didn't actually do any exams outside of the official exams. So a lot of people pay for third-party exams. I wasn't really a big fan of them. You've got pretty much everything you need in the official stuff. Okay, so Samantha just sent in the link for the email stamp. So we'll send out any resources in the future. The next question was...
How often should you review the mistakes document? To be honest, like once every few days coming up to the exams.
Oh, yeah, good question. I'll actually show you. Like this is exactly what I did. Spaced repetition, the last time I reviewed it, I would go on. Like for the 2010 exams, let's just say on the November 12th, I went from 2007 to 2012, running through every single exam I did during that time period. So for chem, special methods, because those are the exams I was doing in year 12. And I would just keep on going. And if I came to the end and I knew it was time to go back to 2006, I would just change the date, like so.
How would you position yourself to achieve highly in year 12, starting in a couple of weeks? To be honest, I would keep on top of content and do as many practice tests or practice sacks as possible and ask a million questions from your teachers. Listen in class, use your class time very efficiently. That's so important. When did I start practice exams? We answered that. What was your after school routine like until you went to sleep? Come home, ideally do some practice exams, do something that I enjoy, sleep. Something of the sort. If I don't procrastinate, get something done and then sleep. But as you saw, I planned on doing 162 exams. I only ended up doing 60. So I don't know where the time for the rest of the 100 exams went. I don't know. I don't even know what I was doing, but yeah.
For me, it was a bit different because I was all locked down the whole time, unfortunately. But there were times where I was going to school and my routine would look like, because I wanted to get into med, I would have to sit the UCAT, right? So fortunately, I lived close to school, which meant I got to home at around 4 p.m. And I would do like an hour of non-negotiable UCAT practice. I wouldn't even change out of my clothes or get comfortable. I would just sit down and do the UCAT practice. And then from that point onwards, until around dinner time, which was around 6 p.m. for me, I would do whatever schoolwork I needed to. And I would do some more work after dinner. But realistically, depending on when dinner was, it was around 6 or 7, right? And if it was a late dinner, then I would just do nothing. I would spend that time just relaxing or preparing for what I wanted to do tomorrow. See, I think a lot of the issue is that we see that, oh, we've only got like 5 hours after school because we've got to sleep on time. There's no way I can do all my study in that time. The thing is, like, you've got like 8 hours at school.
Also, I used the morning before school. I would get to school an hour early
Yeah,
and make
yeah.
that my study.
I've got a few mates who they had a group where they'd wake up at like 5 a.m. and do UCAT practice. And that was their UCAT practice.
I don't know if I ever did that or I don't think
That's a bit crazy.
I don't think Fahad ever did that, but
Yeah.
you know.
Well, my point is utilize the time in school, because the way I could manage my time really well is I basically just told teachers, I think I know what I'm doing. Let me do what I want to do, and I'll reward you with a good study score at the end. And thankfully, I had some teachers that were on board with that and let me do it. And that meant I could utilize my time at school a lot better. Any other questions?
Not really. Oh, could you please send the link for the email Google Forms, as I didn't get it. It's here. It's this one. I'll resend it. Health and human development is also a subject that's highly memory based, right? So sometimes doing exams, is not as beneficial as doing measures to retain content, such as teaching other people or brain dumping things in health, right? And I would recommend that. I didn't do any health exams. I didn't actually care about health all year. I basically did nothing. Yeah.
I cared about health and human development a lot because it was a year 11 subject. And would you recommend doing practice exams outside of study design? I think you kind of need to, because I remember for HSD, that was the one subject where I had to do outside of VCAR exams, because the study design changed drastically, I think in 2019 or 2018 rather. And it just meant that I had to, I didn't have that much access to past relevant exams. So yeah, look into some other companies. I know ATAR Notes is not that bad with some practice exams. So yeah.
Can you guys see the link that I'm sending for your email? Wait, you can't see the link. It says link for email. You guys can't see it? Yes, same, can't see. What? That's crazy. Hold on.
Maybe it just doesn't allow links to be sent. Send it to me on Messenger, and then I'll send it through the Med Prep School.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
Any other questions?
I don't think it's allowed. We're allowed to send links and stuff.
Also, for your 23 UCAT tutoring program, how many people got a competitive score?
Oh,
Quite a few.
a lot of them. Yeah, a lot of them, man. Like some of the highlights, like 3,340, 3,310, 3,170, like that, they're pretty high scores and stuff. And like even like the mean I would say was about 3,040, 3,060. Yeah, we got a lot of insane results.
We're not going to take credit for that though. At the end of the day, it's all up to the student and whether or not they're receptive to actually
of course
taking the teaching.
We give the student everything they need. It's just a matter of how much they want to listen, how hard they want to work, and how much they desire it. Did I continue UCAT prep coming close to year 12 exams? My UCAT was done for long before year 12 exams.
I think from a year 11 perspective, because I know the person chats year 11, right?
I didn't do UCAT prep in year 11. I only did 3 months of UCAT prep.
Forget about it. Just do your year 11 exams and then start it back up in year 12.
Everything UCAT is much more important to do in year 12. You don't need as much time as people say.
Yeah.
You just need to be efficient and do quality over quantity. I sent you the link on that. For the Google Sheets where you would color code your confidence of the topic, should we just copy the VCA dot points? Yes.
Yeah.
How many subjects should I focus on each day? Like, how should I plan my revision in terms of what to cover and such? Focus on what you need the most help on. make sure you're perfect at what you're the best at so that you don't miss out on the ones that you can really maximize and you can really gain on. Can your program almost guarantee a competitive score? Because ain't no way I want to flop UCAT. No, we can't guarantee anything. I think I did have a good approach to study, very consistent, but stress on the day. No one can guarantee you anything. Only you can guarantee yourself. But we can help you a fair bit if you work hard, right? And you listen to us.
Low key, like you already know what to do if you want to get a good score.
Yeah.
Like you already know. If you think hard enough, like you know what you need to do. And it's just like doing the practice. But you know, sometimes there are things that get in between you knowing what to do and you actually doing it. And that's what we can help with.
Beautiful. Any other questions, guys?
Oh, by the way, I just want to note that for the interview and the UCAT stuff, those are just expressions of interest. So it's not like you're signing up for the program or anything.
Yeah, you're just expressing your interest in case you're interested, etc.
How did you guys find it, by the way? Let us know in the chat. Valuable?
Yeah, like what?
Waste of time?
How do you feel about today in general? What's a competitive score to start interview prep?
Ooh, it depends on the
Above 2,900.
Yeah, I'd say. It depends on the uni as well. Some unis are a bit more competitive, but I think above 2,900 would be.
What was something people this year in the UCAT course found challenging studying the UCAT? Motivation, staying hopeful, staying patient. They're the biggest ones. And also syllogisms. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and if you guys are completely new to this our channel, we actually have a completely free course on our YouTube.
Completely free UCAT course. So like use it. It's on our YouTube channel. Free.
There are no practice questions though, because that's removed them because of copyright reasons.
Yeah, but 4 hours of like a free UCAT course. Just use it.
Otherwise it would have been 12 hours, but stitched up.
Happens. You're very welcome, guys. Thank you so much, Nadira. Very loyal supporter of MedPrep. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Peter, coming in today. Thank you, Andres. Thank you, Stella. These are the names I see in chat. I don't see any other names in chat. Oh, David left. Thank you, David, though. Jocelyn, Stacy. If I didn't say that already. Yeah. I don't see any other names. Oh, Anita. Thank you.
Sick. Are there any other questions?
Adham left, I believe.
Alrighty. So, guys, if there are no other questions, I just want to say thank you and good luck to everyone. I think we've tried to give as much as possible away for you to be able to implement into your own routines. It's one thing to give you the tools, it's another thing to apply it. So the number one thing that we can tell you to do from this point onwards is to actually apply what we've tried to give you today. So thank you, good luck, and all the best.